I am so sorry for the way I was. I'm so sorry for what I did, and I don't want you out of my life anymore. I need you to know that. Ellie, I'm sorry.
I told you. Never be afraid to talk to me. I will never be mad at you for dealing with this thing. You gotta know, you don't have to do it alone. So please, don't.
All right. It's time to finally talk about this film. Let's start at the beginning. So in September of 1992, I was born. Just kidding. We're not going to go back that far. I first fell in love with film when I was super young, watching Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Muppet Treasure Island. I fell in love with this sort of, this medium, this adventure that was so otherworldly that it just blew me away as a kid. But even at a young age, I had a very specific interest in how they did it. Mom tells me these stories even when I was, super young. When I watched Jurassic Park, I would sort of turn to her after the big T-Rex reveal and ask how they did it. How does a T-Rex, which does not exist and has not existed for millions and millions of years, how am I watching that on my screen? How am I seeing a Tyrannosaurus Rex happen in front of me? So I had this very specific interest on how films were made, while also believing in them, loving them, and just being sort of enamored by the idea of what movies could do. Smash cut about a decade later, and a movie that I did not expect would catch my eye and turn me onto the path of actually picking up a camera and going to film. That film was Jackass the movie. One night at a campground that we used to stay at as a family, a bunch of friends of mine, they were going to watch a movie. And that movie just happened to be Jackass the movie. And I watched it and I got so interested and invested in one character, specifically Bam Margera. So much so that later on I would get the same tattoo as him. But I just got so intrigued and interested that the next day I went to Mom, who had this very hefty, I used to call it a toaster of a camera. I asked her to take it, and then I went and began filming. Which is quite funny because the last thing Mom said before letting me go see Jackass the movie was, you can watch it, but you need to promise me that you will never try anything that they do in the movie. The next day we were doing the exact opposite.
Oh my God.
Basically, it started out with these skits at the campground. We used to do a lot of water sports back then, so I would just be filming the water sports. Eventually, that sort of migrated into becoming a full-fledged Jackass group called the Dukes of Hazzard. Which sort of officially began in 2007, and then we had a full feature-length movie out in 2008, which was filled with everything that I was told not to do.
Oh!
That got me into the mode of picking up a camera and filming. Eventually that would change into me becoming interested in making scripted content. And at first it was all very, very silly cop dramas starring me, you know, 16-year-old is like the head of police trying to track down a vicious murderer. I remember one of the first ones we made was like a hybrid of a scripted drama and a documentary.
What stage are you at now with this investigation?
Well, we've managed to get the guy's name and where he's staying at. That's the victim's husband.
It was basically like me dealing with all this drama and stuff and trying to find the killer in town. It was awful.
Stop now! On the ground!
But it got me through the door of making scripted content, and I very slowly but surely moved away from making sort of the jackass stuff, which I loved. It was so much fun. And I can't thank the people that were involved enough, as well as the people who watched it, for just giving us a chance. But eventually I stepped away from that and went into the scripted content and realized that this had surpassed the idea of being a hobby and was very, very much cementing itself in my life as this might be the thing. Like the thing that is going to dictate the rest of your life, the thing that is your purpose. And I ended up at now a school that doesn't exist anymore, the Center for Arts and Technology. In school, I remember becoming fairly impatient, and I don't think it's the fault of anybody. I just wanted to make stuff. I sort of wanted to fail on my own terms or succeed on my own terms, and just grab a camera and go. And I just found myself really impatient and going to what we called the cage, which is where all the gear was. And the cage manager was Richard Donovan. And he would let me just take out gear and sort of mess around and go play. And that really helped me sort of go from this sort of amateur handy cam style footage that I was doing before college, and then sort of hone in on making stuff that looked cinematic and learning how to make stuff look good. And within that, it also cemented this idea that, okay, you didn't make a mistake. You know, you didn't move to a city and take a filmmaking class, which not a lot of people do from your hometown. And it cemented that idea that, yeah, this is gonna be hard, but it was the right choice. In college, I started doing music videos, which I'd always wanted to do. And I always had a dream, like, I really want to direct a real music video. I want to direct a video with a band, and we'll record them filming and tell a story and all that stuff. And I desperately wanted to do that. In college, I got to do that twice with 2 videos, one called the Student Poverty Song.
I can't afford these happy times. I'm living off nickels and dimes. It's hard to see what's in front of me. We're one step closer to poverty, yeah.
And then the following one was See You in September.
Run wherever you're from, we'll see you in September. Yeah, every lash you hear be easy to remember. Run wherever you're from, we'll see you in the fall.
And from that, I actually met the Town Heroes, who have been a huge, irreplaceable part of my career and sort of growth as a filmmaker. I got to do videos with them. We went to New York City for my first one, which it's a pretty good debut. Your first music video with a band.
There's room for you in New York City. There's room for you in New York City.
Eventually, we did videos for the Stanfields,
Steady as she goes on a western run.
Glory Hound, so many local bands that are just fantastic musicians. The last major project for film school was to make a short film. And it's what I consider my first official short film, but I got to make it with like an actual crew, actual gear, an understanding of how filmmaking works, which was insanely helpful. And I got to tell a story that I really wanted to tell and that was very personal to me, and a story that would dictate what this documentary is about. The story was called The Sister, which is a film about a young man played by Joel Freckleton, who is a fantastic actor. And he was dealing with severe depression. He was standing on the ledge of a building, ready to jump, and throughout the film we sort of get to see what has led him here, but also in the end, the sort of spark of hope and the one light in his life that keeps him, standing and alive. That being the title character of the sister. Who was actually played by my real sister. After that, we made a Christmas film called Saint Rick, which was all about a certain aspect of Christmas. It starred Santa. Should be enough information. And then we made Ageless, which was a sort of action film that was about a girl who could basically age in a split second. And then eventually the final short film I made was a film called Last Day of Fall, which was my love letter to sort of drug movies. I had a keen interest in the effects of heroin use, especially in the arts, because it was such a sort of stronghold, I guess more chokehold on so many artists, and I found a very big interest in that, and that sort of led me down a rabbit hole of finding films like Candy, which is one of my favorite films of all time. Requiem for a Dream, that's one of the biggest ones. I've had a fascination with what this drug was doing to people of the arts. So we made Last Day of Fall, starring Scott Bailey and Brittany Blake. Brittany being a huge part of my career, who ended up in countless projects. But that was sort of the last short film that I made. With each short film, it was a huge learning experience, and it sort of allowed me to get better and better at what I was doing. At least I felt like I was getting better and better at what I was doing. One of the biggest things with all these films is the length of the films. For most of my career, I was told that I should be making films that are, 3 to 5 minutes long. But because I was incredibly stubborn, I neglected that. I ignored it and I threw it away because I just did not like writing so constrained. I liked writing characters and expanding on characters. I liked sort of getting into their head and understanding more and more and more and stuff like that. And I could never find myself writing something that was under 10 minutes. It was not something I could do. I tried, but I ended up hating all the scripts. And I thought, well, if I'm gonna hate these short scripts, I don't wanna make something I hate, so screw it. I'm gonna write a 10-minute script. I'm gonna write a 15-minute script. I wanna write long, and I did. And I don't regret it. But that whole short film period and making music videos really allowed me the room and the environment to try, fail, succeed, all that stuff. To the point where I found myself considering a 5th short, but discovering that the stories I was writing were exceeding even my own justification on how long a short film should be. They were starting to get into 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And all that led to me finally making a decision in 2012 to begin writing what was then known as Dark Elephant and would become Afraid to Speak. I can't quite remember the exact moment where this idea came to be, but the general idea I was working with way back in the very early stages of what would eventually become Afraid to Speak was I was fascinated by the idea of there being a physical manifestation of depression. It came from, my own personal dealings with it, just the weight of it, the struggle with it, the fight with it, and all that. And I sort of got more and more intrigued by, well, what if it was a person instead of just being this thing? What if it was a human being that you interacted with? And from that, the story developed. But the earliest sort of spark of idea was, the core concept of what if depression was a person? And what if you were dealing with that person whenever depression popped up? Now, other than that concept, I really didn't know what the story was going to be about. And then in 2012, I started just writing and trying to come up with a story of how to fit in this idea I have into a drama. A huge part of me deciding that this was going to be sort of my first feature and deciding that this story about depression, which is a personal struggle for me, was going to be the focus, was actually from John Dunsworth, who a lot of you will know as Leahy from the Trailer Park Boys. In college, he was brought in to, you know, sort of teach us a little bit of the ropes of the whole filmmaking process, but more specifically the acting and writing side of things. He was very specific in this idea of write what you know. You know, the example he had used, I wouldn't go out and write a cop drama because I'm not a cop, so write what you know. And that stuck with me because I knew that, well, doing a feature film was going to be a big step forward. I needed it to be a script that was genuine and that I felt was important. That's what sort of led me to make the decision that, okay, I'm going to make a film about depression because it's something I know. It's something I fight with, it's something I struggle with, and it's something that I believe that I can write honestly about. I knew the central idea of what this was going to be about. It was going to be about a guy dealing with depression, sort of having struggles with it, but then facing it head on in the third act. And it being this, again, this physical manifestation, this human being. But at first, it wasn't a normal human being. It was originally this very dark figure that would just sort of follow. It was almost like a shadow. And eventually, after a few weeks of writing, I ended up getting a treatment for what was then called Dark Elephant. At the time, I thought that this was the story to tell. I thought this version of what has been written is what the film will be about. And it's the right decision, it's the right call. I've cracked the code. Reading it now, it screams of a very immature writer and a very immature human being trying to force this silly, silly love story into a film that is just bad. To explain the title, it was sort of a play on words with the elephant in the room phrase, this being the dark elephant, and because depression was going to manifest itself as a shadowy figure, that would be the dark elephant. Get it? Don't worry. I think it's stupid too. So the original idea of Dark Elephant was basically this. Luke, who would eventually become Nolan, played by Taylor Olson, is dealing with a bad breakup because his girlfriend cheated on him, and now he's very sad and he's dealing with this thing, so he decides to take a load off and then go stay at the family camp, and then this big love triangle starts between him, his ex, and this new girl, and then just stuff happened. But also in there was this physical manifestation of depression, which played absolute second fiddle to this immature, silly, silly, silly idea that was very much coming from somebody who was clearly 19 years old. So in this version of the film, Luke couldn't jump off this waterfall. I don't know why I was so stuck on this idea of him taking a leap off a waterfall, like to symbolize this big leap into the future. But eventually he jumped off the waterfall that he couldn't jump off of at first, and it was with this new girl. And then everything worked out, and then oh my God, it was this great thing. And wow, what a great metaphor for this. And then yeah. Anyways, the script sucked. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't realize that that was a horrible idea. That was all hindsight. So once I dropped the idea of Dark Elephant, the script process then became expanding this idea of this cheating plot and this love triangle plot and all this crap. The next process in this, I think I started to turn towards this becoming something that was actually not complete garbage. The idea behind depression taking the physical form started to take shape and started to take over the film in a good way. I think its focus started to become much clearer, and this struggle between Nolan and depression itself was just much more apparent now. It was pushing the story along instead of, sitting on the bench waiting for this cheating love story to go away. And it became more of a story between Luke, who at this time I believe was renamed to Hayden, and the character of Ellie, who I believe at the time was still Emma. Between them, as well as depression, becoming that third major character. And this also introduced the idea of a grandfather character, which eventually in the final film would be Bill. But it began to take shape in a way that it was supposed to. There's these points about the past, and how maybe the character of Hayden, how he was struggling to understand where this all started, where this depression came in, how it had basically dictated a lot of his life, and how he had never really taken the time to confront this thing. So the story was starting to take shape. It was still nowhere near where it needed to be, but it began becoming something. After the Unwelcome Guest run through with these scripts, I had started asking some friends of mine for help in terms of sort of shaping this story, and I was sharing it more. I was letting people read the script. Two of those people who were incredibly helpful were Tyler Reed and Chelsea Comeau. Chelsea ended up being the DOP on the film, as well as one of the producers. And Tyler was just a huge help in really showing me the importance of this grandfather character. Because I remember us having conversations about how the grandfather and the main character would interact with one another in the camp. Because eventually there was this big fight, this big blowout, and I remember it going from really not consequential at all to the story, and then becoming something that was very, very important. Something that we couldn't remove because it was so ingrained within the heart of the story. So between those two, I started understanding the film more and getting a much better grasp on where it needed to go. Now, something you heard me talk about a lot already is this idea of a cabin. And if you've seen the final film, there is no cabin. The original intent of this film was to film it in my hometown, but more specifically at a lake that I grew up around, which was Barrington Lake in the South Shore of Nova Scotia. I really desperately wanted to make a film in my hometown, and I was ready to do that, and I wrote the film specifically with locations in mind that I knew about. Eventually that didn't happen, but that's where this story existed for a very, very long time, until probably about a month and a half before we shot what would become Afraid to Speak. Once the film was in the Unwelcome Guest stage and also teetering and morphing into Unbreakable Chain, which was its fourth title, there were things in it that were a bit ambitious, and I'm not sure I knew exactly how I was going to film it on a super low budget at the time. There was a moment where Hayden, who would eventually become Nolan, was going to crash his four-wheeler because he got distracted by depression. I mentioned before the waterfall, like we were going to have two people jump off a waterfall. I, to this day, don't know how I was going to do that, and more specifically where, because there are no waterfalls in Barrington Passage. But there was still sort of these remnants of a very immature film. The story was shaping up, and what would eventually become Afraid to Speak was starting to peek its head sort of out of the shadows, but it was still in a place of just, this is, reading it now, bad, immature guy in his early 20s trying to be deep storytelling. But the core idea, which was the sort of spark to all of this, that being the physical manifestation of depression, really got legs near the end. It started to work really well. Problem was everything outside of that was not good. But at this time, with Unbreakable Chain, at this point in, I would say probably early 2014, the script I felt was done. So the characters of Nolan, Ellie, and Sam, who I had named Depression Sam, they were all in place, so it was time to cast them. The lead role, Nolan, we had an open casting call, but we had somebody come in who I had just worked with on another project. It was a short film that Chelsea Comeau was directing that I was filming, called Bring Me Home, which was a fantasy, slight fantasy horror film about a dark fairy who steals the souls of men who pass by. And Taylor played the man that passed by and got his soul taken. We sort of clicked right away, and we discussed on set, what was next for us. Hey, what are you working on after this? And we told him, well, we're doing this film, and it's about this and about that. And Taylor was very, very, very open with me about some of the stuff that he had gone through. And we connected on that level. You know, it went past the point of, hey, you're an actor in this film we're making, and it got to the point of, hey, wow, thank you for sharing. Here's part of my story. And then we eventually started discussing this story of Unbreakable Chain at the time, and he was incredibly interested in being a part of it. I, at the time, didn't think he was right for the role. And I'm not too sure what I was basing that off of, because the only time I'd ever worked with him on Bring Me Home, and he was great in Bring Me Home, but for whatever reason, my brain wasn't seeing Taylor as Nolan. But I didn't have the foresight, and I didn't have the ability to see him in that role and to see him as other characters. But then we had the auditions, and Taylor came in, and it was immediate that he was the one for the role.
Understand? What in the hell am I supposed to understand from you? That I should sit in my room for the rest of my life and stare at the fucking walls? And yet, it always comes full circle to this. With me getting mad and yelling at you. As if you actually exist. But you don't, do you? I'm just standing here, arguing with myself.
He had come in and he read a few scenes. They were very intense scenes. And I turned to Chelsea and I said, he's Nolan. That's it. He brought such an intensity and a realness and a genuine portrayal of Nolan's struggle and Nolan's fight. And the way Nolan was handling himself in the most intense, angry scenarios, as well as the most overwhelming, sad scenes. The range of what he was able to do and bring in from himself into this character was perfect. And whatever misplaced feelings I had that he wasn't the right actor for this role went out the window immediately. The second he started acting, I knew Taylor Olson is Nolan. For the role of Ellie, I don't think we did an open casting call. I think there was somebody that I wanted to work with who eventually took the role, Paige Devon, who I had worked with on a couple of interview style stuff and promotional stuff for Dalhousie University. And I believe I saw some stuff that she was in, and I thought, no, this is fitting fairly well with the character that I think that Ellie is. And then I brought her in for an audition. And if she's watching this right now, she's laughing. Because I may have neglected to tell her it was an audition, which didn't mean to do, just for whatever reason, slipped my mind. And I didn't tell her that, hey, can you come in and audition for this film? She thought it was a meeting to discuss the film. I just forgot to tell her it was an audition. So Paige comes in, she sits at the table, I hand her a bit of the script to read, and then we start. And to her credit and her professionalism and talent, she never questioned it. She never said anything until probably years later that she had no idea it was an audition. She just took the script and she read it, and it was great. So, yeah. Sorry.
What happened?
What do you mean?
We haven't said a word to each other in 7 years. Are you okay? Did I do something wrong? It's just like everything stopped. And we're hanging out. We're talking. And nothing.
All the feelings I had sort of towards her acting ability and just personality, because I always thought that, especially with something like this, there's only so much acting you can do with the information from the script and stuff. I think there needs to be sort of a personal understanding of the subject matter to really deep dive, get into the soul of these characters and present something that is another level to the characters. And she very much brought that to the film. And I don't think anybody else could have played Ellie in the same light. Now it was time for the big bad Sam, depression. So this was another open casting call thing, but I actually had somebody in mind for the film, and it was somebody that I had worked with in the past, Cody Brown. He was one of the lead goons, Alan, in Ageless, and I loved his acting. I loved working with him. He was a great guy. And eventually we decided, okay, here's our guy. After the auditions, he nailed it. He's exactly what we're looking for. He's going to be the guy. Unfortunately, some scheduling stuff came up, and he wasn't able to do it, which is absolutely fine. You know, he's such an amazing and genuine guy. He was super honest about it, let us know as soon as he knew, and it just allowed us to sort of regroup, hold another casting call, and eventually find who we found. Cody was incredibly generous and very professional, and I can't recommend him enough for any project. But eventually when we did the second casting call for Sam, we found our Sam, and I believe he came in with the exact same outfit that he wore in the film, Bob Mann. But when Bob came in, he brought something completely different to the character. Once Bob sat down and he started to get into that character, and we saw this sort of mixture of pure evil behind the words he was saying, but also this odd comedic timing to it, because the character of Sam is so vile in his sarcasm, he's so vile in his specific words, and he uses all these oddly comical lines that in any other scenario, it's like, haha, that guy's funny. But the way that Bob was playing it was like, haha, that guy's funny. Also, fuck this guy.
I'm currently taking bets on how long it will be before you just stop talking to her again. Though I suppose the better question might be, how long before she just gives up on you? I mean, I think I'm the one you should be listening to. I mean, your head is so full of all that fantasy crap. You'd do well to listen to the one voice of reason you've got.
And Bob found that perfect sort of blend of friendly, comforting, funny guy, and complete detestable jackass. And it was perfect. The final role we cast, which was a bit later actually, was for the grandfather, Bill. We had an open casting call for that, and eventually in the casting call we found David Wojcik, who brought so much to this movie. And I think he was a key player, not only on camera, but behind the scenes as well in this film, becoming as good as it could be and getting done.
Nolan, I won't have you doing this. Look, I've been supportive and understanding this entire time, but I will not have you speak to me like that. Do you understand?
The character of Bill, who is Nolan's grandfather, was a crucial view because, you know, I was writing this film from my perspective of depression. I was writing it from the view of, I have this thing. Here's how I see it. Here's how I see it affect me. Here's how I see it affect others and all that. The character of Bill, however, was a completely different point of view. It was a point of view of somebody in you know, an older generation. It was a point of view where they may not fully understand what's happening, to no fault of their own. It's just that this is something that over time has become something that's more understandable, that's more discussed. And David brought this mixture of understanding, also this full heart full of tenderness, empathy, and love towards his grandson, Nolan. David was perfect as Bill. Perfect. So those were the main four. Taylor Olson was now Nolan. Paige Devon was now Ellie. Bob Mann was now Sam. And David Wojcik was Bill, the grandfather. So we had the characters cast. We had the script done, as far as I was concerned at the time. We're ready to go. My first feature, like this is gonna be good. Let's figure out how we're gonna make this thing. Which leads us to Indiegogo. So I had the script, which I naively thought at the time was perfect, and now it's time to figure out how we were gonna make this thing, because there was money that was needed, because we were traveling about 3 hours outside the city with a crew and a cast, but we needed some money to do this. And at the time in 2014, it was sort of the height of crowdfunding, or at least the first peak of crowdfunding. For me, I thought, okay, this is it, and this is the perfect way to do this. We can reach the goal that we had set out for ourselves. Spoiler alert, we didn't. Not even close. Looking back, I realized that I had not set us up for success. Could we have gotten the money in any other scenario? I don't know. I know that the way that we had set it up and the way that I had set it up was not good. I think I was egotistical and arrogant at the time, and I thought that, okay, a Dillon Garland film, that'll get funded. Not the case. I did not set the film up for success or really to have it be understandable to those who were looking at the Indiegogo account. I think the video we had put out was a sort of comedy video. I don't even know what it was. I can't even find it anymore, but it just to launch the Indiegogo campaign. It was this video that was more comedy based, and it didn't talk about the serious nature and the specific reason as to why we wanted to make this film, that being depression and the importance of depression. And I think that was the case for two reasons. One, I think the script did not lend itself to accurately discuss it. The second part of why I didn't think that the Indiegogo worked was because I think even at that point, which would be a major theme for the next 6 years of this, I don't know if I was ready to talk openly about the subject. I don't know if I was ready to admit in a public way that this film was coming from a very personal place, but I just know that I wasn't being honest with myself with how much I wanted to open up about this thing and why it was important. So I think, like a lot of people do, I sort of fell into, well, we'll make it funny. We'll make this Indiegogo announce video funny, so that maybe people will want to support it because it's funny, and not being completely genuine and honest, saying like, hey, this is a film about depression and how somebody who is dealing with severe depression to the point of near suicide is fighting that and finally, you know, coming to terms with opening up and asking for help, which he wasn't willing to do for the majority of his life. I don't think that was covered at all. And I think all of that added up just did not lend itself for a successful crowdfunding campaign. And I think I was genuinely naive to the idea that this could happen. The people that were donating, I appreciate, and I will appreciate until the day I die. But I think early on I started realizing, this might not work. I think for whatever reason I expected it to just work without extra work having to go into it, which was just delusional. This sort of cocktail of a bad script, an immature script, a real reluctance for me to even open up about this and admit that, hey, I'm dealing with this thing and I'm making a script about this thing, as well as the arrogance of, hey, if I put it out there, it's gonna get funded, right? You know, I've made music videos, I've made short films, like I clearly this thing's gonna get made. I don't know what I was thinking, I genuinely don't. We did not even remotely reach our Indiegogo goal. So we had a problem. We had a film that needed a specific amount of money to be shot as it was written, and we did not even get close to what we needed. We had so many incredible people try and help us out and make this happen, and because of them, eventually the film did get made. But our current structure, our current script, our current plan to travel 3 hours away and make this film in Barrington, it was not going to happen, which was a very, very hard pill to swallow. I felt quite defeated at the thought that we just couldn't make this movie. But after a very long period of thinking and looking at this and saying, well, if I put all my money into this, which I did not have a lot, if we are very clever about this, if we find ways to do this, I think we can make it happen. Except that wasn't the case. I didn't hit that conclusion. The conclusion I did hit was that this is impossible. I felt that we had an impossible task that we could not accomplish because we did not have the money we needed to make it happen. So I made the decision to cancel the film. My next step for this entire process, now that it wasn't happening, was to tell the cast and crew. We were in post-production for, I believe, last day of fall, and the post-audio engineer, Justin, he and I were working on the film, and Taylor was nearby downtown, so said, hey, can you come in? I just got something I really want to talk to you about. Can you meet us in the audio studio? So we were in this audio studio, and Taylor comes in, and he sits down. I say, listen, I've got some bad news. We can't make the film. We just can't do it with what we have. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. To which Taylor and Justin decided to tag team, basically tell me that I was full of shit, and then convinced me to make the film anyways. I now had no choice, and I could not have been happier with having no choice. Those two called me out, told me it wasn't impossible. We discussed how we could change the script and make it completely feasible. I started the meeting thinking that this was it. I was going to tell Taylor that we're not making the film, to, all right, it's time for me to rewrite the script, and let's go make this thing. Just like that. I can guarantee you that without Taylor and Justin absolutely pushing me to reconsider making this and challenging me to think outside the box and be willing to switch things up within the script, it wouldn't have happened. But because of them calling me out of my bullshit, the film was back on. So now I was on to the biggest challenge, which was completely rewriting the film, basically from ground up, to remove any aspect that had anything to do with traveling. So the original intent of the film taking place at a lake at Nolan's grandfather's cabin, them meeting up and then sort of rekindling all this lost time at the lake in Barrington, needed to be thrown out, and then we had to rewrite it to take place in a city. That was incredibly challenging in the best of ways, because it really made me sit down, look at the script and say, okay, how do we make this work? And within that, it was the first time that I really looked at this thing and trimmed a lot of the fat that did not need to be there. I think between what existed as Unbreakable Chain as a film that was set in a lake, that version of the film, to what eventually became our shooting script, changed drastically in the best of ways, because it allowed me to mature. It allowed me to look at this in a vastly different light, and the changing of the locations allowed me to look at each individual word. Think, that's stupid, we don't need that, I don't know what I was thinking. I removed a lot of the immature personal aspects of the film. Not all, because unfortunately some lasted throughout the entire thing, but I removed the majority of the immaturity of what was written. It became much more focused, and the original idea of a man dealing with depression that we presented in a physical form finally took shape and finally had a life to it that made sense, that was good, and that wasn't bogged down by an immature writer who was filling in gaps with nonsense. Even though the title didn't change till later, it was at this point that Unbreakable Chain became Afraid to Speak. So on August 9th, 2014, production officially began.
Roll camera.
Rolling.
This is scene 72A, take one.
So our first day and our very first scene was the moment when Nolan goes back to a childhood play area deep in the woods. The very first scene was Taylor alone, as Nolan trying to understand what his dreams were telling me, coming back to a childhood spot, trying to remind himself of what used to make him happy.
Please. Don't let him get to you, Nolan.
And then Sam rears his ugly head and then reminds him, hey buddy, I'm still here to F your day up.
Now, I was having some trouble coming up with new ideas of ways to surprise you, but I think this one was pretty good.
It was a great first day and sort of a nice ease into production. Fairly simple scene, an important scene, but you know, a fairly simple one. Day two, because apparently I'm an asshole, was one of the most crucial moments in the film, which is the scene where Nolan, running away from Sam, gets to a point in the woods where he sits down and he genuinely contemplates suicide. It's a very important scene, and I'm not laughing because the scene's funny. I'm laughing at the fact that I thought that was a good idea. We have one day to get this right, to figure out the flaws of production and sort of come into our own to understand exactly how we're going to film this thing. And on the second day, I'm going to force you to do the most serious and consequential scene of the film. Sorry, guys. From here on out, I'm going to talk about the production side of this film in a bit of a linear fashion. So discussing how the final film looks and sort of going in that order, going a little bit off the rails here and there, really discussing how this entire film was made through the production process. So in the beginning of the film, after we get out of the dream sequence, we sort of get into this monotonous, repetitive, and slightly comfortable schedule that he keeps. He wakes up, he goes to work, he comes back home, he goes to sleep, rinse, repeat. But for Nolan, it's very much comfortable in its repetition because there's no surprises, which then gets completely uprooted because he gets let go from his job. Now he doesn't have that to go to. And he now has to tackle this idea of, hey, now the entire day is just me and me alone with nothing to do. Me alone with my thoughts, me alone with depression. We see Nolan struggling immediately with just being alone with himself. He feels fairly useless because of this fight he's going through and because of this mindset that he's in, because he struggles with this very serious mental illness. As well, you see the feeling that is a massive theme throughout the film for Nolan, which is him feeling like a burden to anyone around him. As he's checking his phone to try and distract himself, his mother calls and he ignores it. He then checks the voicemail.
Listen, if you need any money, just let me know.
We get a lot of information here because we get to see that, you know, A, he doesn't want to answer the phone because he's feeling that he has nothing to give to her. He has nothing to offer her. He has nothing that he can talk about with her, not because he doesn't want to, but because he does feel like a burden. And we're getting our first hint of that in this scene. But he also feels that if he were to open up and say, hey, I lost my job, I need some financial help, or the bigger picture, hey, I'm dealing with this mental illness and I'm dealing with depression and it's really hurting me. He feels like if he opens up about that, it's just gonna wreck her, and he doesn't want to be the reason that he brings her down, which is all very misplaced feelings. A big thing that the mother mentions in the phone call is that his grandfather has been trying to get a hold of him. This prompts him to go visit the grandfather. He feels a little bit closer to the grandfather in a few aspects. I think he feels like he can open up a little bit more with him, at least in his mind. Once he gets there, that all goes out the window and he's sort of back to his mask. He's putting on the mask of, oh no, I'm fine. David, who plays the grandfather, was just so giving with this whole process. He actually helped me fix the script. As I've said a million times, there were a lot of immature aspects of the film, especially the script. David was very helpful in helping me fix that for his scenes. But beyond that, he also let us film in his house. I mean, we had no extra money to pay for locations. We had no extra money to pay for anything major. But David was nice enough to say, hey, come to the house, you can film here.
Well, there's a stranger. Come on in, don't stand there.
You sort of immediately see this excitement that Bill has when Nolan walks in. He can't contain himself. It is genuinely almost childlike. But you also see in a major, major way the lie, the big lie that Nolan has in this story.
It's been a very, very long time since I've seen a smile on your face. I just want to see you're okay is all.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Which is absolutely not true. And I think Bill sees that. He used to see him smile. He used to see him play out in the yard, and he's seen that decline over the years. Not only with, what he's seen from Nolan, but also what he hasn't seen from Nolan. Not seeing his grandson come over as often as he used to. He knows that something's wrong, and it goes past the point of, I'm busy with work, I'm busy with all that, and he knows that, okay, my grandson is going through something that I can't quite grasp and he won't quite tell me, but I also don't want to pry too much. There's a struggle on both sides to really honestly look at this, and we really get that in this scene. One of my favorite aspects of this is just this very uncomfortable nature of Nolan being in a house that he's very familiar with, a house that he grew up in, the house that he should feel comfortable in. But he doesn't. And you see him as he's sitting on the couch when his grandfather goes to get him a couple of soft drinks. He's just very uncomfortable in his own skin being in this building, this house. And he's really got no reason to be, because he should feel comfortable. This is family. This is a safe area. This is a safe zone for him to be in. But he just can't break that feeling of, me being here is a problem. Me being here is a burden to my grandfather. What am I doing? There's a lot of guilt going on within Nolan. And he just feels completely out of place in this place that absolutely welcomes him with open arms. In this, we also start to get the hint that something deeper is wrong. That's very apparent when Nolan stands up and he sees the photo of his grandmother who was unfortunately passed. And Bill opens up and says,
Nolan, if you ever want to talk about your grandmother, I'm here.
And Nolan, who's going through a very emotional moment, just says,
Thanks.
What do you say we start on that stuff upstairs?
Yeah.
Really showcasing that deeper mentality of just this fight that he's going through with his depression, and not allowing himself to be weak in his mind. He's not weak. He's dealing with something that he can't control. And he's absolutely not a weak person, but in his own mind, he is weak. And you can see that in this, when he just shields himself from admission. After leaving Bill's house, our original intent was to introduce Ellie in a driving scene as Nolan is going back to his house. The original scene was going to be Nolan is driving. He's sort of dealing with a lot of stuff in his own head. And then he looks out the window and he sees, oh my God, is that who I think it is? That's my childhood friend, Ellie. They lock eyes, they wave to one another, he drives on, and you sort of see a hint of a smile. So it's the first time you see this hopeful nature of Nolan. The scene, however, presented a ton of challenges, but the biggest aspect of why we changed it, and we just completely removed it from the film, is story. This scene was just way too damn convenient for the plot. Eventually we have Ellie's introduction later, which I think is much more believable and just better overall. So after a quick moment where Nolan comes home and he sort of has a moment where he's just watching TV, he then eventually sees something out of the corner of his eye. And then we follow him as he leaves home, not wanting to be alone with his own thoughts, not wanting to be alone with his own battles. Tonight he decides to go out in public, which is a huge thing for him. It's very tough for him to do that because it's easy to stay home and sort of accept whatever's going to happen and deal with that as it is. And to do something that he feels very vulnerable about, which is just going out in public, it's tough for him, but he just decides, I can't have this fight tonight, so I'm going out. And immediately he regrets it. And then he leans into a crutch, which was supposed to be a much bigger aspect of the film, but we ended up dropping it in the edit just because it didn't fit. And that was him being a smoker. And he lights one up on the waterfront to sort of calm himself down. And during that, the light of this film enters the fray, which is Ellie.
Hello. How are you?
This scene was a bit nightmarish, to say the least. Back then, I had the absolute audacity and arrogance to think that filming with no budget, no lights, on a very busy waterfront in Halifax, Nova Scotia was a good idea. It wasn't. We hit so many hurdles with this that I'm sort of amazed the scene came out as well as it did. We had no lights. We had the lamps that were on the waterfront, and that was it. On top of that, it was also a very busy night.
How are you?
It was very hard. I believe, if I remember correctly, It was the first day of filming. So we had started with the woods scene that worked out really well and then ended the night with this very complicated scene that was very hard to film and accomplish. We got it, but my God, it took a while to get there. Within the scene itself, Ellie's first action after they sort of break the ice and Ellie walks up to him is she takes his cigarette and she chucks it away, which is a real hint at her place in this entire story. You know, this light that came in and her first action is to take something that is harmful away from Nolan's life and flick it away. And then we get into, you know, the big question: what happened? Why did you stop talking to me? Why haven't we talked in a very long time? Are you okay? To which Nolan replies,
I just hit a rough patch. I'm fine now, though. Trust me.
It's just this continuation of the mask that Nolan puts on. It's very much the theme of the film, you know, being afraid to talk about this, and it's why eventually the film went from Unbreakable Chain to Afraid to Speak. I felt like Unbreakable Chain was way too permanent sounding, but Afraid to Speak worked perfectly because of what we see Nolan go through. He is genuinely scared to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. One of the funniest moments of this, if you don't know, Halifax has a party boat that will go through the harbor. You know, you can pay to go on it, you have a few drinks, you listen to some music, you have a good time. That boat went up and down the harbor, I think, 4 or 5 times that night, to the point where it almost became comedic because it would sort of warn you that it was coming. It would go down one way and you'd hear louder and louder as the party boat came in, to the point where we had to cease production like for long periods of time just because we had to wait for this copyrighted music to move along. It sucked at first, but then it became sort of an ongoing joke, like, all right, here it comes. All right, scene whatever A, take 1. And then we went and tried to do it before the thing came back. When we shot the major kiss scene in Point Pleasant Park, it wasn't the party boat, at least I don't think, but another boat came by blaring music while we were doing that. We thought the party boat was following us like a horror film. It was just like stalking us.
It's definitely not home. It's no place to have all your friends together in one spot. I can't. I'm sorry.
Goddamn
I
couldn't believe it when I heard boom, boom.
That night presented a lot of problems, just uncontrollable problems and just guerrilla filmmaking at its finest. But in the end, we got what we needed, and I thought it was a really good introduction to Ellie back into Nolan's life, a reintroduction. So after Ellie's back in Nolan's life, we have a sequence where I sort of consider it the something's got to go wrong because I'm feeling way too damn good. The introduction of Sam, our main antagonist, our physical manifestation of depression, played by Bob Mann. In the original script, the idea was that Nolan was going to go for a little kayak ride, and he ends up on a beach, and then on the beach, suddenly Sam shows up and then they have a conversation. I think it played out in a pretty similar fashion, but once we switched the location to the city, we decided that it was going to be a coffee shop where Nolan was going to go to a coffee shop, and then out of nowhere this character was going to introduce himself, and we would think that it's just a normal person, but then it ends up being his depression in a manifested form. Unfortunately, we couldn't find a coffee shop that was going to work out, but thankfully Bob knew the owner of Sweet Hereafter Cheesecakery on Quinpool Road here in Halifax, and he let us come in and film the scene, which worked out beautifully. In this scene, we see Nolan sort of returning to something that he used to love, which was drawing and just, you know, making art. Clearly, Ellie has already had a massive influence on his life and his mindset, and he now wants to sort of get back to things that used to make him happy and things that he's been neglecting for a while. In comes Sam to ruin it all. The very first take of this, we had Sam sit directly in front of him, sort of at the same table. I actually cut that shot short and cut early before we finished it because I was just looking at it and I thought, this doesn't look right. Like, something about this is off.
So, why not
So then we changed it up to have Sam sitting behind Nolan in another seat, and then he sort of comes in with a little bit of theatrics, and then we're introduced to him. And for the entirety of the scene, except right at the end, he's out of focus. For this introduction to this character, I wanted to do something creepy and something off-putting about never being able to quite see this character. You know, he's always, half his face is completely dark and he's completely out of focus, and it just, I felt like it added to the creep factor. But in this scene, we get the full introduction to Sam as he immediately begins to poke holes in the happiness that Nolan has.
I'm currently taking bets on how long it will be before you just stop talking to her again.
And Bob brings such a balance of friendly and funny with complete venomous spite, and it just works so well. You see Nolan try and fight back, but then he's sort of immediately turned around again, where it's like, oh, maybe he's right. You know what? No, you're not right. This one's gonna be different.
How about you cut the shit with the girl and stop toying with her heart?
I'm not gonna do that.
No, fine.
And the entire time, Sam knows that, I'm gonna get you. You think you have control, but you absolutely don't. Obviously, it's depression versus the person who's depressed, but within this scene, it's guy versus guy. It's human versus human. Sam's one goal is complete control, and basically all he wants is Nolan, and all he wants is to wreck his life.
I really wish I could just shut you up. Because this time, you're actually wrong.
To combat Sam showing up in Nolan's life, he shoots a message to Ellie, and then they go for a drive where they're talking about the past, and Ellie decides that, hey, let's get to know what's happened in the time that we haven't seen each other.
What is grown-up Nolan like?
I really don't know.
And I think it's the first time that he's actually thought about it and realized that he doesn't know, because he's sort of submitted to this idea that depression controls his life, and he is completely submitted to the idea that he has lost himself within this darkness. He has no idea who he is anymore. He doesn't know who Nolan is. I mean, he used to have interests and stuff like that, but they've all sort of dissipated because of depression's hold on him. And then a little later on, they're doing the typical let's go on a date, I guess, thing. Honestly, I feel like this may have been a leftover from the original idea when we were filming on a lakefront at a camp. They're skipping rocks, which is just a bit silly. But then eventually Nolan sort of walks away, but then Ellie sees it and asks him, what's going on? And when Nolan won't answer, she just continues the conversation, talks about the old days. And Nolan isn't hearing a single word of it for a few reasons. One, he is very much caught up with just what's happening. You know, for brief moments and flashes, he's happy because he's missed her. Even though he didn't want to admit it out loud, he has missed her greatly. But also, it's that struggle between Sam and Nolan's thoughts. And then, you know, the big moment happens where they kiss. These two characters who were separated by time and Nolan's own struggles, the feelings never went away. I think there were feelings when they were younger, and that lasted a very long time. And I genuinely think that these two were the love of each other's lives, separated by an extremely sad circumstance of Nolan's unfortunate fight.
I have missed you so much.
But it's a risk, which is another huge theme of this film. It's a risk. Nolan is taking a risk by doing this because it could absolutely backfire, and then he's back to where he started. Sam was right. He's an idiot. He shouldn't have done it, but that's not the case, and it works out. And then we're on the lakefront for quite a decent section of this film. This is sort of Nolan trying very hard to get back on track, and it's very colorful on purpose. You know, so far in the film, we've seen a lot of moments where it's either been grayed out or there hasn't been much color at all. But now we're sort of back into it, and it's colorful greens, colorful blues, and all that. It's funny because when we got there, somebody we know and an actor that we've worked with allowed us to use the spot, which was his property. But when we got there, because it's a lake, and believe it or not, lakes have ducks, there was duck shit everywhere. And we mopped the duck shit off of the wharf here. So that was a start to our day. mopping duck shit. So to begin the scene, we have the two characters walking down, and then eventually Ellie very playfully kicks Nolan into the water. And that sort of playful nature of what, you know, would have been their childhood and years of being friends sort of really comes back. And I think they both realized, like, at that time, that this is wonderful. Nolan has a moment alone where he just sort of thinks to himself, like, we're back. And now it's sort of taken that next level because they have started a relationship. So it's sort of even more incredible to him and her in a lot of ways. But that turns sour fairly fast when Sam comes back.
Hot damn.
So now that he's given Nolan a chance to figure it out on his own, now he has to step in and be a little bit more specific. And in this scene, Sam is just an asshole.
I honestly cannot imagine a scenario where what you say is something that I want to hear.
No, interesting thoughts aren't really your thing, so.
And I think Sam represents a lot of Nolan's fears and insecurities, and I think he represents a lot of the struggle that Nolan is sort of having. But I also, on the other hand, I think that Sam has his own mindset that is separate from Nolan's own consciousness. But he also takes it too far all the time because he knows that I know how to get under his skin. This'll work. Watch, everybody sit back and watch this. I'm about to mess this kid's whole day up.
So I'm looking at this girl of yours, right? And I'm just thinking, she is one fine piece of ass.
Enough!
All right, okay. I'm sorry. That was a bit crass.
Which pushes it past that line of being okay. I mean, it's very clear, especially in this, that Sam is a dick. It's also an example in this scene, just the charisma that Bob has. You know, he says some of these lines in a way where, out of context, you're like, oh, that's funny. This guy's quick. He's a little sarcastic, but he's quick. But then when you really think about it and you break it down to, wait a minute. No, actually, this guy's an asshole. This scene's a prime example of that because he's just taking the sword and he's just nudging it further and further and further into Nolan. With some just incredibly crass dialogue, but because he wants to regain that control, because he wants to make Nolan question everything, and really playing on the things that hurt Nolan in this, just because he's like, all right, well, you had your fun, time to get back to work, knock this off, you suck, come back to me. And it almost works. Almost.
She could get any guy she wants. Any guy in the world. And I'm just wondering, what is she doing hanging around with you?
Another aspect too that you see in this is Sam's use of friendly terminology. Throughout the film, he'll call Nolan like, I'm your friend, I'm in your corner. In this scene, he calls him pal. He uses these terms to sort of get into Nolan's head and be like, yeah, you know, when you think of me, think of pal, think of buddy, think of friend. And there's a couple of moments in this where you sort of see Nolan fight back, and he's more open with Ellie. He's sort of drowning Sam out, and you notice that Sam's sort of starting to lose control a little bit, and he doesn't like it.
I'm sure she'll really appreciate the added stress.
I guess just stress, and you might have been wrong about me dealing with a lot of different things.
My least favorite moment of the film is actually in this section. So, let's talk about Jake, aka Ellie's ex-boyfriend. So originally, I wanted to have an actor play this role. Due to some scheduling conflicts, we couldn't get the actor in, and because of the low-budget nature of the film and the time, the specific time we had to make this movie, I had to, unfortunately, step in and play Jake, who has a hell of a farmer's tan in this. Seeing myself in this film, I hate it. I really hate it. I never want to be on camera in an acting role, and for whatever reason, I always end up, just because of circumstances, being a part of the projects I direct. I was Jake, douchey ex-boyfriend in this. In Leon, a web series that we made, I played the douchebag director. You may be seeing a theme here.
I don't know what hole-in-the-wall film school you came from, but if this plant is not 37 degrees to that light, we are going to lose the entire integrity of what I've been working on for years. So please, start using your brain on this, okay? Use the creative side, cool? Get out of here.
And in a film I directed called The Last Divide for Winterlight Productions, I played a lunatic in the woods trying to break into a cabin who eventually gets shot in the back. So I guess for whatever reason, life is trying to tell me that I should play assholes in film, despite my reluctance to even want to be on the other side of the camera ever. So I don't know what that says about me. I don't think Nolan had anything to worry about with Jake, because Jake just looks like a piece of work that should probably just go away, find a hobby, and leave everybody alone.
There's a leaf in your face. There, you're good.
So during this sort of lakefront segment, especially after Sam sort of grills Nolan, you see Nolan start to get quite anxious, and there was a major point of the scene is to show the anxiety. We had shown sort of the darkness, and there were a couple of anxious moments leading to this. But for the most part, it was just more or less the depression side of what Nolan was dealing with, and we hadn't really gotten full tilt to the anxiety. Well, this scene, we changed that. But the way that it sort of works for Nolan when he's dealing with anxiety and depression is just like every sort of major idea that will make him feel smaller or make him worry or anything, you know, even when it's just a silly concept like the comments they talk about, you know, college, and the alley went to college and it was this big naked party and stuff like that. Like, it's just foolishness. There's nothing to worry about. But because Nolan is always having this little nagging thing in his ear, that being Sam, all of it seems realistic at the time, and it sort of builds up over time where, like, if you take each layer, it's sort of this silly, ridiculous idea that, you know, Sam's putting in his head. But when you put that all together and it's just sort of this big mountain falls onto Nolan, he can't control it. He's anxious. He believes every word that is being fed into his head, and he just gets really, really small. And he feels really insecure about everything that's going on.
I'm insane.
But the line when he says "I'm insane," when he comes out of his anxiety attack, I think a lot of the times, especially for me, you sort of feel crazy. You feel like, you know, what am I doing? Why did that just happen? What just caused that? And then you start to look at it and you sort of pick it apart and say, there's no reason that just happened. This is silly. In the end, it's really not. It's not your fault. It's not that you're crazy. It's not that you're weak. It's this thing that you're dealing with. It's this mental illness that you're dealing with that is very hard to control, and it's very hard to understand when it's left completely alone, which for Nolan it is. I think it's an important moment because it shows you where Nolan is and what he thinks of himself dealing with this. He thinks he's insane. He thinks it's a problem, and he thinks something's severely wrong with him. And I think he feels like it's his fault for overthinking, when in the end it's just a mixture of all uncontrollable things that are happening within his mind, and it's very hard to combat. When Ellie comes back down after talking to Jake, you see a very black and white visual of what Nolan is presenting as himself.
I'll be back later though, okay?
He's very calm, he seems happy, he seems like nothing's wrong, but then when you get the flip side of that and you see his face, even at the beginning of that scene and then in the end, like he's struggling. Something is attacking his mind and he just can't handle it, but then when he turns around he's got a smile, so that mask is always there. Even to a point where, you know, if you hit a certain degree turning to look at somebody, it's back on, and then you're back with yourself, you take it off and it's like, oh, okay, and back on. Sad, depressed, like I can't handle this sucks. No problem, I'll see you later. Back to it, and that's sort of what's happening with Nolan here. Ellie's sort of seeing through the mask, and I think the mask is cracking quite a bit at this point and throughout the film. Ellie sees that, hey, there's something wrong with him, and he's hurting. I don't know what to do right now, and I don't know how to react to what he's going through, but something is wrong and something is hurting him, and I'm going to do my best to try and comfort him, as well as, this day turned weird. I didn't expect it, so let's make up for it, and let's go do something else later on, which leads to the dinner scene between Ellie and Nolan. At least they thought it would only be Ellie and Nolan.
Can you pass the pepper?
Here you go, sweetheart.
Is it just me, or is she looking a little flushed tonight?
The dinner scene is one of my favorite moments because it's sort of the first time that we get a look at Sam truly losing grip of Nolan. So the whole scene is very simple. You just have Nolan and Ellie having a dinner. Eventually Sam pops up and then basically taking control, or at least trying to, of the dinner. Sam is trying his hardest to mock Nolan, especially when Nolan starts to open up and admit how much he does care for Ellie.
I'm in love with you.
Oh, pal. You have no idea how this is supposed to go, do you? I suppose you've got a ring in your pocket, too.
But, of course, Ellie returns the feelings. They're mutual. And this is where Sam loses it. Sam he loses control of the situation that he had very firmly grasped for so long, but he's losing it because whatever's going on between these two is allowing Nolan a little bit of comfort. The risk paid off, despite Sam saying, "Oh, it's a stupid risk, don't do it." It's paying off. It's starting to affect Sam, and he sees that, losing the fight here. Time to do something drastic. There's a couple different ways to shoot this. But I think sometimes you think that you need to overreach with how you film something, and I think when you do that, there's a good chance that you could lose the story because you're sort of overdoing it. You're doing all these fancy camera angles, you're doing all this fancy lighting, and it just sort of like, well, we lost the story because we have so much going on visually or audibly that it's just like everything got lost. But for this scene, it's a simple scene. It's three people having a dinner. One doesn't exist to the other, but it's just a very simple way to capture it, and I think it does the scene service because it doesn't distract from the core point of the scene.
Why am I the only one not eating? This isn't fair.
I'm glad you came back.
And every action has a reaction, so Sam now has to retaliate in a major way, and he does. Smash cut to a very intense dream sequence where Sam's basically pulling overtime. He's going in there, he's attacking Nolan at every point. He's questioning his decisions. He's saying, "Hey, why would you take a risk?" There's a scene where we shot Nolan and Sam in the car. They're driving, Nolan's driving, which the car was never moving. Basically had the van parked, and then we had a light going by as I was sort of turning it on a C-stand as if, they were passing by streetlights. But Sam is really just diving deep and showing you like, "Hey, man, what are you doing?"
Oh, we got a little risk taker here. Veering off that familiar path he knows so well.
But he really starts attacking this risk-taking nature of Nolan and just really going for the throat. It's time to come back to reality, and reality is me. I'm your reality.
See what happens when you take a risk? Take the big leap, and you drown.
And Sam is not done yet. Sam's just getting started. This kitchen fight is probably one of my favorite scenes in the film. Bob and Taylor brought the film to just another level with this scene. Nolan so far has been sort of on the losing side of any control with a discussion with Sam, but in this he sort of gains a little bit of not necessarily control, but I'm speaking now, shut up, at least for a little bit, and explaining himself in a very specific way. And Taylor brought the intensity that really sold me on having him play Nolan in the first place. If I remember correctly, this was one of the scenes that we auditioned with, and I remember Taylor just nailing it, that intensity, that very, very vicious intensity, because Nolan's had enough. He's been anxious, he's happy, he has one thing that makes him happy in his life, and all Sam wants to do is screw it up.
It's like you get a nice, sick pleasure out of seeing me sweat. shake with anxiety, and not even be able to have one fucking night of happiness.
Now that is untrue. I am just trying to help you understand.
Understand? What in the hell am I supposed to understand from you? That I should sit in my room for the rest of my life and stare at the fucking walls?
And Sam doesn't stop his sarcasm, you know? He doesn't turn to anything else. He's just rooted in this sarcastic, dickish manner that he brings out in full force. Now, the thing that's different with Sam in this is that he actually plays silent for a lot of it. He lets Nolan get it out of his system.
Come on.
I can see you're having a bad day.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
It's just that perfect venomous bite that Sam has and everything that he does to Nolan. Nolan's admission here is telling in a major way of what Nolan's going through and what Nolan wants. If there was sort of like one line to describe the whole film and to describe the whole purpose of the film, it's when he says,
I want to feel heartbreak with a slight chance of happiness, which is far better than the alternative of feeling nothing. Not being able to cry or smile or anything, because you literally feel nothing.
Nolan's entire plea here, his entire just speech, everything he wants is explained within that sentence, because he's tired of feeling nothing. He's tired of being in this mental limbo of, oh my God, everything I do, I just feel nothing. I can't feel happy, I can't feel sad. For whatever reason, my brain and this depression thing is telling me, hey, the hell are you doing? Get back here. Just stop doing that. Just sit down. What are you trying to do? Which is just numb. It's how Nolan feels. He feels numb. But this idea that, hey man, I could get my heart broken. I could be sad as hell tomorrow. She could snap my heart into 18 pieces and ruin me. But I'd feel something. I would feel the heartache. I would feel pain. And I could live with that. Because there's also a chance at happiness. But above all else, heartbreak or happiness, I feel something. That's huge for Nolan, because now he's truly, truly coming to terms with what's happening, what he wants, and he's presenting the struggles with not knowing what to do to get out of this because it's controlling his life. One of the big turning points here too is that Nolan says the line,
I want to have what I had before you came back.
And this is where we really see an evil side of Sam, where he says, you know,
see, that's where I think you might have your wires just a little bit crossed. There's this fantasy past of yours where I wasn't there.
Which absolutely turns any sort of progress that Nolan had in terms of fighting this and saying, I want to feel pain, let me do this, get the hell out of my life. I'm going to find whatever it is I need to find to be better and to feel like I did before you were here. Unfortunately, Sam's been here the whole time, and you're deluded.
I've been with you a long, long time. You think I just popped up one day? Out of nowhere, saw you, and thought, oh, he'd be fun. No. No.
Whether it's true or not, Nolan doesn't know. But he believes it because of how serious Sam is being, and then he begins to doubt himself. Because that's Sam's biggest talent, is making Nolan doubt himself. He builds on those insecurities and he makes Nolan doubt everything he's doing. And Nolan mentions this, you know, overthinking things like, hey, is this girl I really love cheating on me? Am I bad, or am I a burden, or everything, you know, mixed within the film itself? Sam's perfect at that. He's perfect at getting under the skin of Nolan. And in this scene, you see that come to a head. You know, you think Nolan is maybe starting to gain some traction here. He's starting to gain some control. He's starting to fight back and, you know, tell this thing, hey, fuck you. No, I want this. I'm tired of you. I'm going to get back to how it was. And Sam flips it again and he regains control. So much so that it causes Nolan to throw a glass, which, you know, Ellie hears, who's sleeping upstairs, and she comes down. And then the downfall of Nolan continues. The Sam-sponsored downfall of Nolan continues. When Ellie comes down and Nolan's just sort of having this moment, he's on the verge of tears, like he's about to collapse into himself. He tells Ellie to fuck off, and he doesn't mean it. None of it's words that he means at all. He's just so caught up with this absolute destructive force that is Sam, ruining him and burying him and just turning him into this heap of a emotional mess. And because of that, you know, everything that Nolan's saying is towards Sam, but unfortunately it comes out towards Ellie, and none of it is genuine.
Can you please just fuck off?
What?
I said, fuck off!
And he immediately notices that, because he's like, shit, he got me again. I cannot believe I did this. And outside, you know, that fight continues where Nolan is trying to explain in a way what is going on, but he can't take it that one step. You know, earlier in the film, he says, you know, it wasn't your fault, about not talking for a while. And he's nearing that point where he can jump over that hurdle and say, hey, I promise you, it isn't your fault. I'm dealing with this thing, but he can't quite get there, and it's the same with this scene. As soon as they start talking, you know, Sam's coming down the stairs and he's mocking him again.
What the hell was that?
I woke up in a pissy mood, and I didn't mean to say that to you.
Who exactly were you saying it to?
Tell her it was me.
I'm sorry.
Mocking Nolan's own sanity, really, with this entire thing, and Nolan has a real trouble. He's almost there, you know, he's inching towards this idea of admitting that, hey, I'm hurting. It's hurting me so bad that I'm hurting the people I love. I'm sorry, but he just can't get there because Sam still has that control, and Nolan hasn't broken that yet.
Come on, tell her you're arguing with the strange but handsome man who follows you around everywhere, huh?
It's okay, just tell me.
Nolan, I'm your friend. Introduce me to your girl.
I don't know! Okay, I just don't fucking know.
And it leads into a very, very dark moment in Nolan's life. And then we hit the section of just pure irrational thinking coming from Nolan. He's going somewhere. He doesn't know where. Quite frankly, he doesn't really give a shit, but he's going somewhere and he needs to get away from Sam, whether he's driving 100 miles east or 2 meters out of the yard. He just needs to get away from Sam in some fashion. So he ends up, you know, going for a walk in the woods, and then that leads to a very, very intense moment. But before we get there, you see that Sam is not giving up. Despite the fact that Sam has basically just ruined a relationship, it's not enough for him. You know, he still doesn't feel like he has the full control he should have on Nolan. But he just keeps showing up. No matter what corner Nolan turns in the woods, he's just trying to get away from him.
Remember that time you told her to fuck off? I mean, we could laugh about that now, right? No? We can't. Okay.
Which leads to the one-take scene where Nolan is trying to understand what's going on. He's trying to get away from Sam, and Sam is just popping up in different areas. Like, Nolan cannot find him. He understands, like, he's right there. Oh my God, will you stop? And then he's gone. It's like, and then he hears a voice. He finds him down here. Oh my God, he's gone. Looks around, he's gone again, and then he's behind him. The original plan was that we were going to film that in a way where, like, we were moving around. There's a bunch of camera angles and stuff, and we were just going to get this whole thing in, like, you know, 8 different angles and cut it all together. Thankfully, we had a Steadicam during the filming of this. So on the day, we decided, why don't we try something that's a one take? Can we do this in a way where he's zipping around and it's, you know, it's interesting, and like he's sort of like here and then he's not, but can we do it in one shot? Is it possible? So I think we were trying to get away with movie magic by sort of hiding it behind the cuts, where a bunch of angles would sort of hide that we're moving him around and all this sort of magic is happening. And in the final edit, obviously, it's fairly seamless, and you can't really tell that there's anything off about it. But if you hear the raw footage, all you hear is this scuffling of feet on dirt and rock as we're all trying to get into place at the right time.
You are clearly going to need someone to help you through this very difficult time you're obviously having. Look, just don't yell at me again, okay? It's just not a good way to treat your friends.
The next scene after this Nolan is continuing to try and get away from him, and you start to see him become very emotional and sad, almost at the verge of tears. The original plan for this was that Sam was going to continue his sort of tirade and say, like, you know, you can try and get away from me, but guess what? And then he's going to end up popping up in front of Nolan.
Right in front of you.
But it didn't quite work with the way that the next scene played out. But this one worked a lot better, especially how the big moment coming up turned out.
Yeah, see, I don't know what makes you think going deeper into the woods is going to make any kind of difference.
So the next scene is one that kind of did a 180 on the day, but it made the film so much better, and it made the scene so much better. The original intent of this scene, which is Nolan on the verge of suicide, was supposed to play out where Sam was going to sort of push him towards it, sort of mocking him like, oh, you're not going to do it. Well, come on then, we're waiting. Like, come on, the bus is coming. Let's wrap this up and get it over with. But on the day, Bob and Taylor came up to me and said, I don't think this will work with the way that the story is going, and I don't think it'll work with the way that Sam's character specifically is sort of arcing in the story. They had basically suggested, can we have, 10, 15, 20 minutes to go away, sort of come up with something that's still in the same vein of what the scene is, but sort of different in terms of execution. And I said yes, because for me, there are certain aspects of a story, especially when you're writing and directing, that you sort of fall in love with and you want to keep, because there is an overarching vision for a director. There's a thing you want to achieve, and it's something that you thought about for a long time, and you want to make sure that it's the vision that you had planned for this story to sort of follow. But I genuinely, for me, and every director is different, but I genuinely, for me, believe that the collaboration aspect between director and actors is hugely important. Because if I don't trust them, we have a problem. I need to trust these actors with my life in the same way that I hope they trust me with, taking care of them and making sure that they have the environment and trust and love of the art to make sure that what they're doing is respected. And I am very much one to take in suggestions, because I think that it's very rarely, I've never seen it actually happen in this way, but it's just very rarely a case where somebody's coming in and doing it for their own good, doing it selfishly, where, I'm an actor and I'm a character. I'd rather do this because, I think it's better for me. I've been lucky, I guess. I don't know. It's never happened to me. And this was a case of, it not being that and continuing not to be that. Bob and Taylor, specifically Bob, with the way that this was going to change for Sam. And Bob felt that the overarching story of the character it was working except for this one spot, and it was sort of a sore spot. And in hindsight, looking back, I understand where he's coming from. I'm glad he brought it up. Sam finds Nolan on the verge of taking his own life. That all sort of remained, but the way that Sam came about it changed drastically. Instead of pushing him and being like, all right, come on, do it. Been here before, come on, go ahead, do it. In sort of a challenging manner, it changed from that to a sort of desperate friend coming up to Nolan and saying,
well, we've certainly been here before, haven't we?
It was a complete twist from the sort of this violent nature that Sam was portraying in the past couple of scenes, trying to regain control, and it was just sort of this we've had our fight, and now come in for the hug. Like it's fine, despite the intention still being very vile and against Nolan's well-being. But it completely 180'd from this sort of challenge to do it to, come on, we're not going to do this. We're pals. I'm in your corner. Let's not go down this road. And it worked a million times better than what I wrote. What I wrote just simply didn't work. I thought it did at the time, I genuinely did, but looking back at it and seeing what Bob brought to that scene and how they changed it, I almost made the wrong decision. And I'm glad Bob and Taylor suggested, hey, can we have a chance to change this? Because not only did it change the scene's dynamic in terms of the story, but it changed the way that I was going to film it, because my original intention was sort of all these angles, and it was going to be an intense, sort of fast-paced scene. But basically what happened was when they came back and they had something ready to go that they wanted to show me with the scene changes, I said, all right, let's see what you have, and I'll stand over here and I'll watch, and we'll see if maybe I want to change something, or if I like it, or maybe even if we want to go back to the original intent, because I don't know, I didn't know what they were going to do. They then performed, and I watched sort of leaning down on this rock and just watching sort of in silence from one angle. I just stayed there and I watched the whole scene. And I realized that if we had taken this in a way that I had planned, which was fast-paced, lots of angles and all that, it would have absolutely done a disservice to the stillness that worked so well with what they were doing. You know, this was an intense moment, but it wasn't about sort of fast-paced moving or thriller aspects to the thing. It's not a thrilling scene. It's a very sad scene. It's a very personal scene. There's a character who thinks that he cannot escape this hell to the point where he is considering taking his own life. And when I watched them play it out for the first time, this new version of the scene, I just realized that, you know, let's put a camera here. Let's film this. Let's be as still as possible, and let's let the intensity be what the characters are doing on screen. And let's not do this in a crazy, hectic manner. And it worked on every level. And I owe that all to Bob and Taylor, because they were willing to ask, and they were willing to put in that extra work to fix something that they felt could be better, and to change something that they felt would better the overall story. Not just that scene, and not their personal acting, and not something for their demo reel later, but something that they felt would work better for the entirety of the film. And it did. You know, you marry that to Donnie Wall's music, and it's just this perfect marriage of incredible emotion and just insanely important and desperate and sad and every emotion that I can even think of. Just a big moment for them. It just worked out so much better.
My fight has been taken from me. This is my last chance.
The scene itself, I mean, this scene is a very low moment, obviously. The location that we used, it was actually a location that we filmed at. I was a production assistant on another film, and they had found the spot and they filmed it, and I always loved the look of it, because you sort of have all this bush in the background, but in front, what you see in the ending of the scene, you have all these dead trees. And I thought that it was a good sort of visual metaphor for what Noel was going through. He found something beautiful, and for a little while his life sort of looked a little bit more colorful than it did before, and now he's sort of back into this place of just pure depression and near suicide, and now what's in front of him is just a dead forest. The scene itself had a lot of aspects that were spontaneous, obviously, with what I said, but one of the key things was in the scene itself, Nolan, once he throws the knife away and he sort of accepts like the fate that this isn't going to happen, he recites something that he very clearly has read a lot, has possibly written down a lot, something he's become very familiar with over the years, and that is his suicide note. And what he recites when he talks about his grandmother, when he talks about he has no fight left anymore, how he apologizes for what he's about to do, that is all a note that he has thought about so much, that he has written down so many times that he can recite it from memory, word for word.
Please forgive me for what I'm about to say. I don't want to live anymore. My life is a deep hole, and the harder I try to dig myself out, the deeper and deeper I get.
Taylor actually wrote that. We talked very early on, and I suggested the idea that, hey, what if you, as Nolan, came up with this? Now, this is a very dark moment. It's a very serious moment, but just the pure honesty and the genuine nature, it was all Taylor. Taylor's one of the most talented human beings I've ever met. He's one of the most passionate human beings I've ever met, and he's just full of empathy and love, and he's able to create stuff like this that is so important, that is so meaningful, and that is so tied into not only the character, but this idea of depression and this idea of suicide. Taylor cared very much about what we were presenting, and it shows in this moment where he wrote this thing that is much better than anything I could have written, and really shows just the struggle in the most intense form of what Nolan is going through.
Please forgive me. I love you. Goodbye.
One of the sharpest lines, I think, in the film, and sharp meaning just like a knife, in the end when Sam says,
That's nice. It's very poetic. You should write it down.
a full-blown mockery of, you know, Nolan's thoughts and his suicide note. Because Sam knows what this is. Sam absolutely knows what Nolan is reciting. And to just stick it in him one more time because he can't help himself, he has to make a comment like that. And it's just such a poisonous line. And it sort of shows that despite Sam playing friendly for this brief moment, he's still the piece of garbage that we've seen throughout the film. It never would have happened, and it never would have been as good if we went based off of what I wrote. And I'm okay admitting that. It was a humbling experience because it allowed me to really understand how important that collaboration is and how important that trust is between, you know, filmmaker and actor. I think we would have lost the third act of this film in a major way if the talents of Taylor and Bob, you know, weren't there to fix this and change it. And if the care wasn't there to make this simply a better film, a better scene, and a better moment within the entirety of the story. And I owe so much to them for that. Once Nolan returns to the house, we have a very crucial moment between him and Bill. So the grandfather's there cleaning up the glass, and he's just sort of asking, hey, what happened here? And Nolan has to put on that mask again. And he thinks that, you know, once he says, I'm going to go take a nap because I'm tired, that's the end of it. But Bill wants to know what's happening.
I'm going to go take a nap.
Why's that?
I'm just tired.
Nolan, what's wrong with you?
And then we get a very, very big moment, and I think a very crucial moment for the point of view of Bill when he says,
look, you're an intelligent guy. Snap out of it.
I think that there is a lot of misconceptions about depression and mental illness where, you know, some people believe that, hey, that guy's too smart to be depressed, or that guy's got too much going on to be depressed. He's got too much in his life that's working to be depressed, and it's just not the case. You know, there are so many other variables to this thing that you just can't control, and I mean, you could have the best day of your life and still have this thing attack you in such a severe way. And that gets under Nolan's skin, and you see the look he gives his grandfather before walking upstairs is a very intense look, because when Bill says snap out of it, Nolan says, without saying a word, he says to Bill, you don't understand what you're talking about. You don't understand what I'm feeling. I'm not going to snap out of this. I've been trying for years. I can't just snap out of this. What are you talking about? And I don't think the meanness of that look is necessarily directed towards Bill as a person. I think it's more directed to the idea of that, you know, Nolan can snap out of this, which he obviously can't. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work to just say, oh, fixed. I'm all done. And it's a bit of a play on this idea of some misconceptions about what this is and how it works, and this idea that you'll get out of it. Go get some fresh air, go for a walk, go hang out with friends. You'll get out of it. You're just in a funk, which is just not the case. This is a very serious thing, and it's a very hard thing, and it's not just this thing that's a phase for some people, And it's why Nolan gives the look that he does, and it's why the follow-up to this is, the plea from Bill saying,
"Seriously, Nolan, what's wrong with you? You don't have to be afraid to tell me. I don't like seeing you staying in this house alone all the time. It'd be good for you to get out."
Nolan just wants him out of there, not because he doesn't want to see him, just because this is hurting me and it's going to hurt you, and before it does, please leave. Don't talk to me anymore. And Nolan gets a little bit sassy with Bill, and Bill sort of, as a little bit of an authority figure, says,
"Nolan, I won't have you doing this. Look, I've been supportive and understanding this entire time, but I will not have you speak to me like that. Do you understand?"
Yet in his voice, you hear that sadness. It's not like, "You don't talk to me like that." It's sadder than that. It's brokenhearted. And which, the scene ends with Nolan saying,
"Don't speak to me." It's as simple as that.
A sentence that is not a literal sentence. It's not a sentence that he means directly as it's, described. It's a sentence that means, leave me alone, because all I'm going to do is make your life worse. All I'm going to do is be a burden on you, and everything about me is going to hurt you. So please just get out, because I don't want to hurt you anymore. It's just a real sad moment of the feelings that you can have when you're deep into this, where you think that no matter what you do, your actions are going to be a burden on somebody else. You're going to hurt somebody else because of the hurt that you have, and you not being able to control that hurt that you have. You think that everything that you do is going to be a burden on other people. It's going to hurt other people, and the best solution is to be alone so that you don't have the chance to hurt anybody else. And it's an incredibly heartbreaking thing.
The further away he is from you, the less pain he'll feel. This is better for him. Trust me.
So once this big blowout happens, between Sam and Nolan and Ellie, Nolan and Bill, and sort of everybody leaves his life, it is like we sort of reset the film and we reset the story. Nolan's back to this daily life of sleeping, getting up, sitting on the couch, watching TV, doing absolutely nothing, and then back to bed, and then, rinse and repeat. And it shows that, for a brief moment, Sam won. Sam regained control of Nolan's life. And it shows within this monotonous redundancy that Nolan's life becomes. And it's breaking Nolan down. And Sam just keeps driving the spike in. They're watching TV at night, and Nolan gets a text from what we assume is Ellie. Wink, wink, it is Ellie. And then Sam sort of enters the scene and reminds him, "So who's that? We doing this again? I didn't think so." As Nolan, throws down the phone. And this all leads to sort of our most calm dream sequence of the whole film, which Nolan, for the first time we see him, fall asleep. He has this dream, which is much more calm, much more smooth. It is upsetting and it's sort of unsettling, but in the end, it's very much sort of opening his eyes to something about Ellie. Something about their past. And he wakes up naturally. He doesn't wake up in a panic. He doesn't wake up in this sort of like this fever dream state where he's just, what was that? Oh my God, that was like a horror movie. It was a slow eye open, and he realizes something about what he just saw, maybe the key to all this, which leads him to the woods. The very first scene we shot for the film, which is him returning to the spot where they used to play, and confronting this thing and trying to understand, okay, you used to be happy here. What happened? What is going on? And then, of course, Sam never failing, shows up again. But this time it's a little different because you start to see the impatience that Nolan has. He's on the verge of figuring out what it is. It's reminding him that, you know, there is somebody there who wants to listen, and that being Ellie. And this all leads to the big moment, the big final confrontation.
Too bad you missed the sunrise. It's beautiful this time of year.
The original plan was we were going to film this back on the lakefront. I think the original script called for that. For whatever reason, I didn't feel it was right. I didn't want to return to that lakefront. I thought that the whole thing wouldn't quite work with what we were sort of trying to achieve here. And it just seemed like a location that had nothing to do with the story. So what we decided to do was we went to Citadel Hill in Halifax, which is a big open spanning field. And we filmed it there. And what I love about that is that it is a complete contrast to what Nolan's normalcy looks like. You know, Nolan is always sort of in his house, and he's always dealing with this thing where he has this, as I've mentioned so much, this redundancy of life where he's stuck in a house. He feels, I think, a little bit safe in that, where he is in a place that he knows. He's got walls surrounding him, and he feels like, okay, I'm not exposed, I'm not vulnerable. Yes, Sam is here, but at least I know he's here, type of thing. Where this big open field, I mean, there's no way for him to run anymore. He can't run away. It's a big, big open field. He's exposed, he's vulnerable, he's completely open to everything in the world, which is what he needs to really look at this and admit, hey, I'm hurting, you know, this is why. Bob is amazing in this because he really goes full-blown vile in this. You know, he's had vile moments leading up to this moment, but this is when he admits, like, hey, buddy, I'm not going anywhere.
But what you need to understand is that I am here to stay. You can try to run, hide, ignore me, push me away, but you can't. You haven't yet, and you won't.
And it's brilliant because Bob brings out this insane intensity to the scene, and it's just, it gives me goosebumps, you know, watching it and thinking about it, because it's just this scary, scary moment where you think for a moment, oh, shit, he might be right. Like, even Nolan thinks that. Like, he might be right. This might be it for me.
You naive, ignorant, arrogant, dumbass! There is no you without me, and you know it. I am your shadow. I am your breath. I am your every thought. And trust me, buddy, this is probably the only relationship you will ever have that you won't lose, no matter how hard you try to fuck it up!
And then Nolan gives a very, very impassioned speech where he finally, after all this time, fully opens up. He explains it in every specific detail, how he feels, what has caused this, how it feels to feel numb, how he admits that he feels like he has no reason to live anymore, how people in his past have hurt him so much to just, you know, raise this thing that is, you know, gnawing at his heart and gnawing at his brain and everything. He lays it out all on the line.
This is what life is supposed to be like. I shouldn't be sitting up at night wondering if anybody would care if I was gone. Or when I find someone special in my life, I shouldn't be worried if they're talking about me behind my back or cheating on me or doing everything they can to ruin my life and break my heart. I always end up blowing things so high that people end up doing the things I'm afraid of because they can't take it anymore. And I can't blame them. I have no way of dealing with this. I have no way of countering the pain I feel every damn day.
This moment, this speech and monologue is something that I consider both the easiest thing I've ever written and the hardest thing I've ever written. Early on in the writing process, I knew there was going to be this sort of confrontation between Sam and Nolan. Even though I think back then it was like, Luke and dark figure. Like there was no, specific name for depression. But I wrote this monologue and this speech, and it all came very naturally to me. And there's a reason for that. I find with my own life that it's easier for me to use film as a way for me to speak and a way for me to say things that maybe I genuinely want to say in real life. I just don't have the courage to do it. I'm just not brave enough to say these things in real life. And it's ironic to me because of what this film is about. This film is called Afraid to Speak for a reason. It's about a man who's dealing with depression, who is afraid to talk about depression. And I always found it very ironic that the scene where our character who's dealing with depression finally opens up and lays it out all on the line was the easiest thing I've ever written, but also the hardest thing I've ever written, because it was not from Nolan's voice. It's from mine. And I think that's why it was the easiest and hardest thing, because it was things that I wanted to say, but I never could in real life. And it was also the hardest thing to write, because I had to dig deep and admit a lot of things and confront a lot of things. And it always scared the shit out of me to see it on paper and know that someday we would film it and someday it would be out, because it was so personal. And I'm so happy that the person to perform these words was Taylor Olson, because I don't think there's another person on this planet who could have performed it the way that we did and respected the words as much as he did and understood the words as much as I did writing them, but also had the courage and bravery to perform them in a way that was so genuine to the original intent and the original origin of where they came from. The big reveal, obviously, at the end of the film is that he's not talking to Sam. It seems like he is, and Sam's sort of taking it all in and letting him go ahead, go get your speech out, whatever. But it ends up that, Nolan is actually talking to Ellie, who's just behind Sam, and the moment that we reveal Ellie, Sam realizes what's going on. He's absolutely livid. He disappears, for a brief moment within Nolan's life, and we get to the core of the film, which is, the title, Afraid to Speak. Nolan isn't afraid to speak anymore. He's saying it as it is. He's telling Ellie, somebody he loves and cares about, exactly what has been happening and how he feels. And because of that, he's able to take a step forward in understanding and confronting this thing that is controlling his life.
I am so sorry for the way I was. I'm so sorry for what I did, and I don't want you out of my life anymore. I need you to know that. Ellie, I'm sorry.
For me, if this moment didn't work, I thought that the film would be useless. I thought that everything we built up to this point would have been for nothing. But this moment worked. And when I saw people see the film and they realized that Ellie was actually the one that he was talking to, I noticed that there was oh, thank God. I was hoping she'd be there, and I'm so happy she was. Because I think a lot of people rallied behind this idea that Nolan was simply hurting, and him opening up was going to help him, which it ultimately does in the film. This moment worked.
I will never be mad at you for dealing with this thing. You gotta know, you don't have to do it alone. So please, don't.
It shows this unimaginable pain being alleviated, and the man who's feeling this pain taking a step forward to understanding and confronting this thing that is just killing him. And it's the point of the movie. Afraid to speak. He's not afraid to speak anymore. And I could not be happier with how it worked out. Paige as Ellie brought so much to this story. It brought a different aspect of, you know, depression. Each character sort of serving this different aspect. You have Bob obviously as depression, so that's sort of the core antagonist of what's going on. Bill and his mentality of how he'll get over it, you know, not in a mean-spirited way, but maybe in a slight ignorance to the total thing, which is not his fault, because obviously, you know, the understanding of this thing is it's hard to grasp. But also you have Ellie, who's coming in this as somebody who is very close to somebody dealing with this, and there's a helplessness there. What do I do? You know, I see that you're hurting. I don't know what to do about this. I know you can't snap out of it, and I know that it's not your fault, and all I want to do is help, but I don't know what to do. I wish you would open up to me, but I also can't force you to open up. So it's an entirely different point of view for this film, and it works so well in contrast to Nolan's just loss of control to Sam. Paige brought a very unique, you know, aspect to this. She brought an incredible work ethic. She brought an incredible talent, acting talent. She got it. And conversations I've had over the years with her just about this film and about life and everything, it drives the point home that, you know, Ellie wouldn't have worked without Paige. I genuinely believe that. I don't think that it would have been the same. And I think Paige brought such an honesty and genuine nature to the character, and also a heartfelt understanding and generosity to Ellie that just would not have been possible in any other scenario. And I owe a lot to her for making this work and making up for a fairly immature writer who maybe didn't understand quite how to write certain roles at the time. Yeah. You know, Paige fixed Ellie, and because of that, Ellie works. And I and this film owe so much to her work. The film ends with a bit of a wrap up and a voiceover as you know, Nolan explains what's going on, how he dealt with this thing for so long that he gave it a name. But the most important aspect of this ending voiceover is that, does he pop up from time to time? Yes. You know, this depression didn't fully go away just because he opened up. But now he has a support system and a way to talk about it, that now he's able to look at it and have a better management of this thing that he felt was originally uncontrollable and unbeatable in a way, that he absolutely can never manage and never overcome and never be able to have a normal life, because this was going to ruin every moment of his life. And because of the support system he has, and because of him finally opening up and admitting to somebody that he trusts and loves, he gained the ability to confront this in a much more stable way, and it helped him. But I thought it was also crucial to share that, you know, this didn't erase depression. It simply helped him grab control of it a little better than he had before, so that he could move forward towards managing this and having a life where he could feel happy with a slight chance of heartache. So that was the main production. Something that sort of on every level should not have worked. You know, we hit a lot of obstacles. The fact that we had no money, we had very limited time. We were doing this with everything against us, pretty much. But just because of the determination of those involved, and the clear understanding of how important the subject matter was, we managed to get done what I consider something very special. Something that was punching above its weight class and had no right to work as well as it did. And that was because of the crew and the cast that we had. Without them, this would not have happened. You know, without the support of the cast, this never would have happened. Without the support of the crew, allowing me to make this thing happen. I mean, filmmaking is not a one-person job. You know, there's no arrogance in the world that could convince me that I could do this on my own, without people who are willing to go that extra mile and just give it their all for the sake of the story. You know, not a selfish thing, not something only for them, but for the story of the film. These things don't happen without that, and I can't thank everybody involved enough for making this work way better than it ever had any right to be. You know, a film that started out as a silly, immature, cheating storyline turned into something that I thought it was very powerful in a lot of ways. So after the main production filming, we went back to get a couple of things that I realized once we started editing and all that I think we needed to make the film flow a little better. And the majority of that was the dream sequences. The younger cast of characters playing Nolan, Ellie, and Sam. Those were played by Jonah Whitehead, who played young Nolan, Rebecca Ryan as young Ellie, and Lachlan Cranston as young Sam. And looking back and even looking at their likeness and looking at just the way that all panned out, I think it worked beautifully. I think it all matches up. You know, I think there's a believability that these characters could grow up and be the characters that we see as adults. And more importantly, I think it added a through line to the entire film. And I think that there was sort of it bookends with these dream sequences where we open up and the first thing we see is young Ellie's feet hitting the snow and running away, and then Nolan chasing after her, and it sort of goes into this moment where Nolan has a bit of a moment to himself where he sees Sam. We don't see him on screen in that moment, but he sees Sam sneaking up on him. And then it ends with him feeling like, oh, Sam's coming around the corner again, but it ends up being Ellie. And then Ellie sort of leads him out of the woods into the great unknown. The original thing was going to be a bit different, but I think having these dream sequences and showcasing this sort of innocence of youth with such a serious subject really tied everything together, and it sort of it pushed the plot along in a major way, because you got to see what it used to be like, and this struggle to sort of explain to Nolan within his dreams what may help you. It's this internal battle between Sam and Nolan's memories, Sam trying to corrupt them, and Nolan's own brain trying to show him like, hey, pay attention to this, like this is important, where, Sam's just trying to destroy everything. The actors did great. We went and shot in Frog Pond, which at the time it was like the dead of winter, just a massive amount of snow. But I think it worked really well too, because it's a much different thing. Most of the story takes place sort of over a summer. So to have that sort of complete contrast in the winter, I thought worked. And also, it's sort of the more that you saw, the more information you got. It sort of led to the event of Nolan understanding it and then moving on to just being able to confront this in a major way, and to talk to Ellie in the end and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, and all that, and leading him to understanding why he has to talk to Ellie and why it's important for him to talk to Ellie. It helped it so much where some information I think was missing in the original intent of the film. With these dream sequences and with the younger version of the characters, I think it really wrapped it all in a nice package and made the film feel from beginning to end as part of the same story, and nothing was really out of place. Where I think originally there was maybe some missing parts that, I just noticed that something not here that should be here, what is it? And it ended up being, the kids, representing the past and what the future could be for Nolan. Once we wrapped the film, I immediately went into editing and tried very hard to get sort of a cut of this together, because I wanted to put it in then it was known as the Atlantic Film Festival, now it's known as FIN. I just felt like that sort of hometown viewing was important. So we went into editing, and I think I had a first cut fairly soon. The cutting of the film really allowed me to trim a lot of the fat that I think we just didn't need. I think I had a lot of sort of like scene ends that it was too much, like cut 30 seconds earlier and it's much better. We had transition scenes that were not needed, like one of Taylor running out of the house and then getting into a car and driving off, but we didn't need it. We cut from him inside and then leaving the house to him already in the car. I mean, an audience isn't dumb. They know that he's driving a car. I don't need to show you how he got in the car. It's just useless information. But it allowed me to sort of pinpoint a lot of moments that didn't need to be there, and then delete some scenes that just were redundant, and really tighten the story and sort of craft it to a point where it was a flowing narrative, and it sort of made the most sense. The biggest aspect of this, and just the amount of work they put in, was from Justin and Brad and those who helped them with the sound design in the final cut. I mentioned earlier that moment in the audio studio where it was me and Taylor and Justin, convinced me with Taylor, like, cut your shit out and go make this damn movie. But Justin also, like, he gave his house to us, he gave us support, like, he just knocked it out of the park with making this thing work. Within production, pre-production, and I owe him, not only for this film, but for so many projects I've had. Without him, I don't think my career happens, and I don't think the stories that we've told within short films and feature, I don't think they happen. Justin's talents and ability to just adapt, and his quality and his unrelenting talent of finding the best way to produce something in sound and just overall everything. So many late nights I spent with him in a studio trying to fix audio. I remember all-nighters at the old school we used to be at. Justin just gave so much to me and so much to this film, and I can't thank him enough. He's just one of the most talented human beings I've ever met. Along with Brad Cormier. Sound is so important. I've heard this saying a lot, and I believe it. I don't think there's ever been a good film with bad sound. I think yes, it's a visual medium, but I think the first thing people notice is bad sound, because of Justin and Brad, and because of their professionalism, and because of their quality. Without that, this film is just not what it turned out to be. And so much of this film is owed to them and the work that they put in, and I cannot thank them enough. Married with that as well, with the sound, is Donnie Wallace, who did music for 2 short films I made, Ageless. And Last Day of Fall. He did the score for this, and I sort of see film. There's sort of moments where your film comes to life. Once you get the script done, it's like, okay, the story exists. So that's sort of step 1 in the birth process of this. Step 2 is when you get the film done, when you get the film shot. Here's your blueprint, and now you have the film shot. So okay, now it has another life to it.
I love you, but I have nothing to live for anymore. I never wanted to burden you, so just live your life as if I was never here. Then you get the cut together, and then it's a whole other thing. But when music gets put in, I find that, it's just, the skeleton's there. We have all the skin, we have all the organs, we have everything, except we're missing one thing, and that's the beating heart. The heart's in there, it's just not beating yet. And then when the music comes in, I think that first pump of blood goes through the heart in a film. I love you, but I have nothing to live for anymore. I never wanted to burden you, so just live your life as if I was never here. Please. When I first got the music Donnie made for this film, I remember very distinctively, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I cried because it was so beautiful. The way that he captured the darkness, the serious tone of it, as well as the hopeful nature and light that Ellie was, and this relationship that Ellie and Nolan had. I'm sorry. You're such a jerk.
Marry that with the dark tones of Bob and Sam whenever he comes in.
And not have one single day without you. I came here to get away from you. Not to have you follow me around.
It's just this beautiful, beautiful score of complete understanding of what the story was. You know, because I think you could have made a score that was, hey, that's a great score. That really, you know, that fits the film. Or you could have a score that had the soul of everything this film was trying to be and everything this film was trying to represent. And I think Donnie found the soul of what we were trying to do and put that into a musical score that just lifted this film up to the skies. And I'll always be grateful for what Donnie did with this. You have the sound design team with Justin and Brad and those who helped him. You have Donnie's music and you put them together and put them with the visuals, and then you have something that, again, and I mentioned this before, is punching above its weight class. And that's because of the talent of those guys and just their ability to create art, legitimate art. The amount of hours they work just to make this thing happen, it's phenomenal. And when you watch the film and you hear the sound and you hear the music and everything, just know that a lot of hard work went into it, and it was the talent and abilities of those guys that made this work. Once the film was at a stage where it was sort of like a rough cut, barely done, I submitted it to the Atlantic Film Festival, but it never got in, and I understood why. I got it. The film was in a rough state. They would have just had to fill in a lot of gaps mentally watching that film to even think that it was, you know, even decent, let alone good enough to be in the festival. So I got it. But once the film was done, I resubmitted it because it was within that timeline that I could, and I really wanted to have that hometown showing, at least hometown being Halifax. But the second time we got rejected again, and that one stung a bit, because I thought that the film that we had created was very much, you know, good enough to be in a festival. I thought the film was great, and I thought it was because of the people involved, not necessarily me, but I thought it was because of the people involved with making it the best it could be. And I was slightly heartbroken when I got the rejection letter that it wasn't going to play in the Atlantic Film Festival, because, you know, that is the biggest festival in our province, and I was just very heartbroken at the idea that it wasn't going to be shown, and that stung a bit. I think that lessened my enthusiasm on the film, and for a while I think I struggled with feeling that the film wasn't good enough. You know, I didn't create a good enough film to be in it, and I thought I let a lot of people down, because I thought, you know, what did I do wrong that this film couldn't get into the festival? So many people worked on this, and I genuinely thought that they deserved to be showcased on a stage like this, and we just didn't get in, and it hurt quite a bit. I don't know the reason why it never got in, but I really did wish it would have. I think that would have been huge for us. So around that time, I was very concerned, and I was like, shit, is anybody ever going to see this? Are we going to be able to get into a film festival, which is obviously so important to a filmmaker and to the process of making movies? Are we going to be able to get this thing seen on a professional level? And I thought for a very long time that was not going to be the case, and I thought, this isn't good. Until somebody took a chance and wanted to show our film. So after the big rejection from the Atlantic Film Festival, where it sort of hit me harder than I thought it would, I did get worried that this wasn't going to be seen on any sort of professional stage, until the Showcase Truro Film Festival said yes. They want to show the film. This was my first feature film, which is huge. There are so many ways that I could have gone about this. I could have gone down so many different routes in terms of getting funding to make a film or all this, but a lot of this was all or nothing in terms of let's go make something sort of on our own. You know, we obviously went through the Indiegogo route to try and get a little money, but a lot of this was, all right, let's go sort of fail or succeed on our own. And when we didn't get into the Atlantic Film Festival, I thought we failed on our own. It's like, shit, we tried this and it didn't work. But when the Showcase Trove Film Festival and every incredible human being that ran it said yes, I just felt this fire back in me, and I thought, thank you. Because now we had an audience to show this film to. And in my opinion, it could not have gone better. The film debuted in the Showcase Trove Film Festival at the Marigold Center on October 3rd. I was so happy with how it all went. I didn't know how this was gonna work out. I really didn't. I think there was a lot of roadblocks along the way and so many reasons to not do it. I mean, I almost canceled the film. All of those fears and all of that just went out the window the second the film started. Hi, everybody. First off, thank you so much for everybody who came out tonight. This is, like you said, the premiere of a project that I have been basically attached to for a good year now. I'm working on it. And it feels kind of surreal that we're showing it tonight, but it also feels fantastic. And it's finally kind of done. And I say kind of because I've been giving the Trove Film Festival heart attacks, I think, for the last week and a half because I haven't had the film done. And then, is it done today? Yes. It's not done today. It's done tomorrow. It's power outage, I couldn't get it done. So I got the film done in like today. So sorry about that. So other than that, let's watch the film. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoy it and tell everybody about it. If you hate it or love it, tell everybody about it. We had an audience, a receptive audience that was so giving with their response. From what I can tell, they enjoyed it, and we got to show a film in front of an audience, which at the end of the day, it's the only reason I think we do this. I mean, if we make a film and nobody sees it, what's the point? You know, for me, I could put a film somewhere and get, you know, accolades or something or awards, but for me, the more important thing and the thing that really makes me want to do this is to see people sitting down and watching the film. Whether they enjoy it or not, that's a whole other thing, but just showing the work we do is so crucially important to me. And the fact that the incredible people at the Showcase Trove Film Festival gave me that opportunity and gave us, everybody who worked on this film, that opportunity to showcase the film meant the world to me.
Yeah, it's weird though, and we did like a Q&A thing afterwards and I talked about this, but having been involved in this film for so long, having been nonstop every day stressing about this movie and just constantly being reminded about the subject matter has been very daunting, to say the least. It's gonna take a while for me. I'm actually, everybody's out eating and I'm just kind of like, I just had to take a moment away and kind of calm myself down. Overall, I'm very, very, very happy with how this all turned out. Yeah. It's worth over the year of, you know, doing this film. This is huge. My very first feature film premiere just happened, and it went perfectly. There's nothing I would have changed.
It's hard for me to put into words. When I was young, I'd watch movies like Jurassic Park. I'd watch movies like Star Wars. And that stuff excited me. I mean, I wanted to make that. I wanted to make a movie that people saw and maybe would feel emotions about our work. You know, the stories that I write, the stories I direct, the stories that are made because of the cast and crew. I wanted that so badly. To see it happen, I mean, it felt real in that moment. You know, we had gone through years of writing, we had gone through this whole process of making the film and editing the film, but when it started playing at the Trove Film Festival, it felt real. And I remember being a kid again, watching that screen and knowing that, yeah, it wasn't just a hobby. It wasn't just something that was gonna be a phase. This is it, man. And it cemented that in a major way. Also, David got to see the film. I think there's an aspect of this industry that is slightly revolving door. And I think there are many aspects that, you know, people come in, people come out. For me, I've been very, very lucky that the people that come through that revolving door have left such an impression on me, and I've been able to work with some of the most amazing human beings on the planet. You know, past the point of you know, this person's an actor, this person's a grip, this person's a caterer, you know, way past that point, just amazing human beings. I've just been lucky. I don't know when that luck will run out and I'll have to deal with somebody who's just a prick, but so far I've been incredibly lucky in my own career to have crossed paths with some of the most giving and generous, empathetic people I've ever met. David is probably at the top of that list. So David passed away a few years back. It sort of hit me when it happened that I don't know if I ever thanked him enough or explained properly enough. I think sitting down with that, I think it softened me as a human to realize not to hide emotions behind, you know, bullshit masculinity or something like that, but to be honest with people and let them know that you give a shit and you care. David gave so much to this movie. And I know I've said that already a few times, but I need to reiterate that. David gave the film this unique perspective, this incredible performance. He brought Bill to life in a way that no other human being could, in the way that he handled himself on screen. He helped me craft the character in parts of the script. He gave us his house to film in. He was just so giving with this entire film. And one of the biggest aspects that I'm happy about when it comes to this movie is that he got to see it. And I can't speak for him, obviously, but when I talked to him after he saw it at this festival, he seemed proud. And because of that, I was very proud. Film is very family oriented. You know, obviously there are sets that can come in, do something and move on, and there's no emotion involved. There's just, hey, we made this thing cool. All right, where's my next paycheck? For me, it's a deeper collaboration than that. It's something that is very much everything I work on. I feel like this is a family. For a very short period of time, this is a family, and now we have this thing that we made together that will last a lifetime or beyond. And David's willing to give us as much as he did was proof of that. And beyond acting, beyond a movie, beyond what we made as a film, David as a human being gave me confidence as a director, gave me just that step up I needed to finish this thing. And he allowed me to believe in myself for a little bit longer to finish this film. And I am incredibly happy that he got to see the film in a theater setting and he got to see the work that he put in. And if there's any takeaway from the Showcase Truro Film Festival that is at the top of my list for things that festival accomplished for me, it will always be, I got to show David the film. And despite me maybe not saying it out loud as much as I could, I hope that he understood, and I hope that the film said thank you enough for me, because that film owes so much to that man.
No good, Chelsea?
That's great.
That's good.
A year later, we got to show the film again in a film festival, this time the Parsborough Film Festival. This was October 22nd, 2016. And I was, a year after we had showed it for the first time, I was excited that, this long out, it still was being shown. And it was being shown to an audience in a completely different area now, a completely different audience. And I was just really excited. So, driving up to that, I just was reminiscing about the entire film, the process from 2012 to 2016, how much work had gone in and how much we had all changed as humans since we started. But we got to show the film at Parsborough, and again, another festival that took a chance on us and wanted to show the film. The screening went great, and afterwards we did a Q&A. And one major aspect of the Q&A really signified that this film was important. There was a man in the audience who, during the Q&A, raised his hand, and it had a statement and not a question. And the statement was basically, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the specific words he used, but the statement was basically, because he had seen the film, he understood the aspect of depression more. He got a better understanding of what it meant to be battling depression. And if that wasn't the point of this film, I don't know what was. You know, we obviously want people to talk about depression. We want people to, in my feelings, I hope that at some point depression is talked about like a headache, you know, being understood, being something that we can openly talk about. Hey, I got a headache. Hey, I'm dealing with depression. You know, I want those two sentences to be the same in terms of comfortability of talking about it out loud. And to hear him say that, hey, you know, your film allowed me to understand this thing that it can at sometimes be hard to understand. It meant so much to what we were trying to do with film, and so much to this idea that, hey, we're making something that is important and has a purpose and was needed. So those two festivals, the Showcase Trove Film Festival and the Parsboro Film Festival, gave this film a shot, and they gave us a chance to showcase this film, and because of it, we had an audience see it, understand it, and hopefully progress the conversation of depression, anxiety, and how it affects people dealing with it, how it affects people that know somebody dealing with it, and sort of everything in between. And the fact that they took a chance on us makes me so happy, because we did. You know, we got to show it in my home province. We get to show it in our home province. And that means so much, because this is our home. This is where we made the film. This is where we all decided to be filmmakers. And to be able to show that on two incredible stages, it's just, it means so much. So thank you to everybody at the Showcase Trove Film Festival and everybody at the Parsboro Film Festival for giving us a shot and sharing our film with an audience. After we finished this film, when we had a few festival showings and all that, we had sort of behind the scenes continued planning sort of how we're going to put this out. Along the way, we also had the opportunity to show it on another platform. You know, we wanted the festival run, which we had, and now we had a bit of an unexpected platform to show the film on, which was Eastlink Community Television. Around late 2016, early 2017, I was invited to be a part of Cinema 902 for Winterlight Productions. And Cinema 902 was basically a program to create, you know, feature-length stories. And I got to, along that process, make my second feature film, The Last Divide.
It's Chloe I'm looking for?
Yeah. But you watch your back. And be careful.
Just know you better find her real fast. Because if someone were to beat you to it.
As well as help write and shoot Chelsea Comeau's first feature film, who was the DOP and producer on Afraid to Speak, her film Creepy Crawling.
He's slow tonight. Must not be able to handle the competition, huh?
Bad, or something is seriously wrong.
But along with that, the Cinema 902 program was also showing a few films that already existed, so sort of bonus films for the program. And luckily, we were able to show Afraid to Speak through that. And it opened us up to a whole new platform, which I thought was amazing. We got to be, you know, not only premiere on Eastlink Television for a TV premiere, meaning that it got to show on TV at a certain time, and then if you tuned in, you could watch it. But also it got to be put on the on-demand service, which is a national service. I mean, the film Afraid to Speak was available, and still is available, on Eastlink TV across Canada, which is just mind-boggling to me. The fact that we had the opportunity to share a story that was very Nova Scotian, also very important, across a platform like Eastlink was just, one, unexpected, but two, just an incredible opportunity to share the story and have it accessible to so many eyes we never expected to have it accessible to. I can't thank the people of Winterlight Productions enough for not only taking a chance and allowing me to do Last Divide and Creepy Crawling, but also looking at Afraid to Speak and believing in it enough to have it be a part of this program and to have it be something that is available across the country. Every time I think about that, it's insane to me in the best of ways that we get to make this film for cash-wise, like under $1,000, and it got to be seen across the country on a platform. That's bonkers to me in every way, but it's so cool to know that all this work went into something that can be seen in so many different ways. So, the process of this film being made took a very long time. From 2012 to 2014 was the writing process that I said, where we went through Dark Elephant to One More Question to an Unwelcome Guest and Unbreakable Chain, and then eventually Afraid to Speak. So this thing has had 5 titles. And then since we shot it in 2014, the summer of 2014, and finished it up a little bit after that, it's been 6 years of this recording, almost to the day actually. 6 years that we've had this film, and we've been working on this film. So the big question is, why did it take so long for this film to come out publicly? And that is an intense question with an intense answer. So I mentioned earlier about scene 75 when I talked about how the monologue from Nolan was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever written because it came from within. It was very much a POV of me and writing down the words that I wish I could have said in real life, which I still have trouble saying, but it was just a very hard thing to write, but also easy because it was all genuine and true. So, why did this film take 6 years to come out in a way where everybody had access to it? There were no hurdles to jump through. There was nothing you needed to subscribe to. Why did it take this long for it to become available for everybody? There's a double-edged sword when you write about something so personal to you. For me, it's very important. I over the years have found out that a lot of my writing and a lot of my films are based in fear. They're based on fears that I have. So Afraid to Speak being, hey, the fear of talking about something very specific. The Last Divide was the fear about not knowing where a loved one is in very dangerous circumstances. I've noticed that I like to write about fear, and I like to jump into my own head, but also create characters that aren't me or anywhere near me, and see how they would react. So a lot of the core ideas come from maybe fears I have, but then I manipulate them and sort of throw everything at them to see what happens in the end with these ideas. My biggest feeling and my biggest fear with Afraid to Speak on a public platform, in terms of my family would have access to it, my friends would have access to it, everybody that I knew would have access to it, everybody in the world would have access to it if it was public. My biggest struggle and my biggest fear with this was that if I put it out, I would have to confront it, and I would have to admit a lot of things that I think I may have played down over the years. Even now, even now I struggle with this. So I'm going to try my hardest to not be a hypocrite and not be afraid to speak. I deal with this in a very major way. This film did not come from a place of fantasy. This film did not come from a place of I'm making this up as we go, and then we'll see sort of where the story goes. This story came from a deep, deep personal feeling and struggle that I was having, that I am having. Once the film became real, once the story was done, once the editing was done, once the film was, for the most part, finished, although over the years it has been fixed and all that, I put every hurdle in my way to, without knowing, at least consciously knowing, to slow down the process of putting this film out, because I knew that the second I did, I would have to admit, yeah, I'm dealing with this. What you see in the film came from a place of understanding, a place of experience, a place of real life fight. And I thought, as Nolan does within the film, I thought that there was a judgment with admitting that this was the case. I felt like there was an admission of weakness. If this film came out and I had to confront this idea that this is me, that was hard to get through. That was hard to confront. That was hard. That's still hard now. to look at this and say, I made a film that was about me, and it's about a man dealing with depression and having a very hard time talking about that. And then for years, having that same problem in the most ironic way possible, where I think I slowed down the process of this film being completely finished and completely public because I was scared to confront that idea that if it's out, and now I have to admit it. But what I found out, which fuels the irony of this entire scenario, is that the more I discussed this and the more I talked about it, the more I understood the people out there deal with the same thing. The more I understood that people are willing to talk about this judgmental mindset is not as rampant as I thought it was, and people are willing to listen. Not everybody understands it, and I get that, and I know that there's a lot of information that just isn't quite out there yet in a way for everybody to universally understand what depression is. You break an arm, you understand. The bone inside is broken. But how do you look at somebody, explain, hey, I struggle waking up in the morning. I struggle getting out of bed in the morning. I struggle convincing myself that me as a human being has any worth. I struggle with feeling like a burden to everybody that I cross paths with, family, friends, strangers, anybody. I feel like I am weak because I'm dealing with this thing called depression. And all those factors lined up have made it incredibly hard to put this film out in a public way. But all in all, I also realize that the more I talk about this, the more I see support, the more I see understanding, the more I see people willing to understand it more and want to confront it more and help people with it. And over time, I've realized how important this conversation is. And by not releasing it and not being able to look past, my own personal struggles and being able to look at this on a broader stroke, looking past all that, I realize how important a story like this is. And this isn't sort of me stroking my own ego saying that I wrote the perfect film. I didn't. I'm not saying I directed it perfectly. I didn't. But the story that we created, the film that we have made, is highly important to the progression and the discussion of what is such a hugely important thing that is hurting so many people. And I think allowing us to discuss this and not being afraid to speak is only going to help the bigger picture of this discussion and what mental illness is. And the more people see stories like these coming from somebody who is dealing with it on a personal level, the people are going to be able to support those dealing with this, and hopefully we can open this up to lessening the pain, not having people feel so alone, not having people feel like they are the only one dealing with this and that they have nowhere to turn. And I think that's crucially important to share. Do I regret it taking this long? Yes. It's one of my biggest regrets of my career. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life, and it's something that I thought about every single day leading up to this moment. But it was hard to get past my own wall, and it was hard to break through my own Sam to understand that this was incredibly important and this needed to come out. Because if one single person sees this and it helps them either understand this a little more or help somebody directly dealing with it understand their own strength and allows them to believe the truth, which is that they're not weak, they're incredibly strong, and most importantly that they're not alone, then that just makes all the work worth it. And it makes this film completely worth it. And the best thing is that that's already happened. And now it can happen all over again. And hopefully more people can see it, more people can understand it, and we can push forward even more to understanding this thing that is very, very hard. Very hard. Yeah. I have thought a lot about what I want the legacy of Afraid to Speak to be. I've thought a lot about, do I look at this as, this is my first feature film. This is a great stepping stone into making films, full time. This is a great starter for my career, or other useless tidbits, none of that matters. And once I fully understood what I want the legacy of the film to be, I realized that it was completely counterintuitive to everything I've ever been told about film. What I want the legacy of Afraid to Speak to be is I want this film to be irrelevant. I want this film to hit a point where it doesn't make sense anymore, where it's outdated, where everything in the film seems so ridiculous and obvious that it's a completely irrelevant story in the future. Hopefully the near future, hopefully sooner rather than later. I've thought a lot about this because I had sort of hoped that by 2020, 6 years after we made the film, 8 years after it sort of began as an idea, that it would already be irrelevant, that this discussion of mental health and depression, anxiety specifically as it pertains to this film, would be at a point where we could discuss it like a headache or a broken bone. And the understanding of it would be, near universal. I think a lot has been pushed forward when it comes to this, and I think we've made huge leaps in the support system to those who are dealing with this, as well as those who are not dealing with it but maybe know somebody who is dealing with it, and understanding that and supporting that. I think we are better off now than we were. However, I don't think it's enough yet. I think this conversation needs to continue happening. I think this conversation needs to surpass one day a year where we discuss this. I think mental health needs to be treated as a serious thing. Depression needs to be treated as a serious thing. It needs to be respected. It needs to be taken very seriously. It can't be used as a C-level plot line of a TV series. It can't be used in any way other than respecting what it is and pushing forward the understanding and the ongoing fight to have this thing be as open of a conversation as I sprained my ankle. There are so many people that deal with this. I'm one of them. It was a very hard thing to overcome to release a film like this that was so close to me. But I know it's important, and I know that there are so many people out there who are dealing with this, and things like this, a personal perspective on a subject matter this important, is so valuable to the ongoing understanding of mental health, depression, anxiety, and every other form of mental health issues. I don't think we're there quite yet, and I think there's a long way to go. But for those pushing forward and helping this come along to becoming understandable and more approachable, I think it's incredible what you do. I will only ever be happy with this film's legacy when its legacy is of complete irrelevance and people look at this film and say, this is the most outdated thing I've ever seen, this is silly, this is not needed, let's go watch something else. That's my hope for the legacy of Afraid to Speak. This process has been incredible. It's had its ups and downs, of course. It was very hard to do. We had no money. We barely had time to make the thing happen, but we had so many people who were so invested and determined in making this film happen in the best way possible, and that's the cast, the crew, the post-production team who absolutely nailed it. From the music to the audio design to everything in between. This film does not happen, and this film is not as good as it is if one of those people is not involved. And I will forever be grateful for those who believed in the project and helped us make this film happen. I am forever indebted to the people involved with that process. And to know that it is now out for every single person to see is a lot less scarier than I thought. To those dealing with this, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, you are not alone. This is hard, I know. It's scary. It's terrifying, it's sad, it's every single emotion I could come up with. But you are not alone. This fight does not need to be something that you fight alone. And just know there are people out there who understand, who want to support you, even if you feel like there's no one left. Because I promise you right now, the world is better because you're in it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the film. Thank you.
Look, Nolan, don't ever be afraid to ask for help, okay?